Welcome back to episode 27 of the On Patrol podcast. I'm Wyndehurst Productions, joined with...
This is the Fightin' Kentuckian.
There we go, man. And we've got a great episode. We feel it's a great episode here for you because I think you'll find in this deep dive, our scores will show what we think of this set of rules. But before we get into it and Kentuckian tells us what it's about, we're going to start with alibis, caveats, and piggybacks. Kentuckian, why don't you start us off with those?
Okay. As you know, we tried to do a lot in September, and we were going to get 2 episodes in. Unfortunately, we had some basically fall-throughs on interview or push to reschedule. We got pinched with a little bit of family work. We still plan to get caught up, especially for our missing in the summer, but we're just still starting to get our feet under us with the transitions and everything that's going on. So we'll be back with a blast, but we'll, we look forward to, we've got some pretty interesting, I'll say, episodes lined up for in the fall. Just making sure that we can get on people's calendars and that we keep those dates is very important. So I mean, like, if you like the interviews we did with Yorkshire, some of the other systems that we've talked through, other people that we've talked through, we've got a lot more surprises kind of in store this fall. And so just grinding on everything else. I'll talk projects and that stuff when we get to the end of the episode. I'm just super stoked to talk about this episode, and I want to spend all the time in the world diving into it. So I'll kick it back to Wyndehurst for his alibis, caveats, and piggybacks.
Yeah, thanks, Kentuckian. The only one I have is, I think at least one person told me there's a little bit of odd audio from the last episode. I apologize. Obviously, neither of us, our primary jobs have anything to do with technical, so this is all learn as you go. And we both moved, and I'm right now working on a whole new setup, so hopefully everything will sound good this month. But as always, bear with us. This is something we do for fun, and we are not experts on. Compared to some of the other podcasts, I mean, how many episodes was Yorkshire up to? You remember?
It was up there. It was, I don't know if he was triple digits yet, but he was up at 50s or 70s, yeah. I thought.
Yeah, so we're only on 27, so we've only done this 27 times, counting this one. We'll always keep sending us that feedback. Don't just ignore it, because I don't know, sometimes it might sound good on our end, even when I record it and push it. But if you guys are hearing stuff, let me know. So that's all I've got for alibis, caveats, and piggybacks. Kentuckian, why don't you tell us about this episode?
Okay, I'm stoked. I'm pumped. All right, deep breath. From Chariots to the first arquebuses, we're going to be diving into a rule set that attempts to set up a streamlined game to be played across 3,500 years. I said that right. 3,500 years. That's what I meant. From the earliest city-states to the War of the Roses and everything in between, this is no easy task. However, this is exactly what the Hail Caesar 2nd edition rule set attempts to do. On this review, we can't waste much time because there is so much to cover, so we're going to really dive right into it, just basically based on the size and scope that we're going to have to get into and what we want to talk about. So, as always, grab your spear, your shield, your longbow, your crossbow, or your siege engine, and join us on this episode of On Patrol. Let's go.
Thanks, Kentuckian. All right, so just a recap for those, if you've not listened to any of our deep dives, we use the same metrics every time. We've got about 10 categories, and we're going to grade it 1 through 10. 10 being we obviously absolutely love it. Anything really over a 5, though, is a positive review. We're basically saying it's good, maybe not the best, but obviously the higher it is, the more we like it. And so with that, the first section we always cover is presentation. Is it a book? Is it a PDF? Are there options? And things like that. So with Hail Caesar, Warlord does this for most of the rules. It is published by Warlord. But they're very good about having hard copies and PDFs for all the rules. So it does come in hard copy, and there are PDFs. There are hard copies and PDFs for, I believe, all the current supplements. Correct, Kentuckian?
Yeah. They're the only thing is I would say some of the stuff is only going to the PDFs now. Like I think after they've sold out. So like Britannia is one that unfortunately it stood in my Warlord cart for I think ages, and then after many a months I could not. I'm trying to look for it. I have it around here somewhere, but Britannia you can only get in PDF now. So that might just be, hey, it's a one run. I've seen a lot of other companies kind of do that, unfortunately, with their rule books, but still great. And just like what we talked about with Studio Tomahawk and some other things, very unfortunate that people don't do PDF after they do their runs, just to give more people access to their rule books.
Yes, I think it's especially important with Hail Caesar, or any kind of mass combat game, which tends to have more rules. There are 235 pages, and so as we talk about this, like how's the book laid out? It's uses the same formula that a lot of Warlord games rule books are. It starts, you've got like a history section, which is great. They cover a lot of the the main kind of block periods that the rules cover, with some history and some maps, and even like a list of like battles that took place in that time, give you great inspiration. It is 235 rules, 235 pages. A good portion of that, it's like 20 some pages, is just that history section. So I know I've been critical in Warlord in some of the rules because sometimes it felt like they have too much fluff throughout the rule book. It is not the case in Hail Caesar. The fluff, the history is all right up at the front, and then it's all content after that, which is, I think, is very good. Kentuckian, do you want to add anything just for how it's laid out? Your thoughts on how it's laid out?
No, the history is, I don't know. I've heard people like, I enjoy it. I just enjoy it as having it as part of the rule book. I haven't seen any one of Warlord sets really get it wrong. I know there's some other books where I've had like people say like, hey, they missed this or they've done this. It's really a 30,000 foot view of some ancient periods. You're talking like just a few pages on, it's got some maps for War of the Roses, things like that. It's got a few pages. I think that I was showing. Here's Dark Ages where some battles are fought. I'm for the history. I know it. I'm sure it adds to the cost. It's more pages to print, and a lot of people are like, I know that. That's why I'm into the period. But I think it's especially good for those who hopefully are like historical curious players. And then the layout. We'll get into the sections a little bit. I'm a big fan. The pictures, everything else. I think it's streamlined. I think it's clear. No really kind of additives other than what you said. Yeah. I love. We'll get into this, I guess, when we talk about. It might be a good point to talk here, but if you're looking at the last few pages of the rule set, and this is one thing that version 1 had, it might not have been in the greatest, but the last like 15 to 20 pages of the rule set is basically laid out how to play. Rules summary. I think it starts on 216, and it goes for a decent amount of pages. Yeah, and that is, just phenomenal, because in my mind, it's an outline. And the way when I'm studying big subjects, or if they're big rule books that I like to play, it is so hard. I love to, as much as the next guy, post up my rules and like put little Post-its in there and everything else and stuff. And, I do that when I'm really into a game. But to have that page in the back of the book to see how things connect and are kind of very summarized, that are 20-page sections or 15-page sections, can be distilled down from soup to nuts in the rule set in like a 16-page summary, is just awesome. Because even if you're like, how does this connect? It'll be pretty close, and you can make sure that you have the mechanics right, or at least what was intended.
Yeah,
I have to guess. I say that now for the layout. I think that affects the layout a little bit, but I don't really see that in a lot of other rule sets. So
that's true.
That's a top of the thing.
I did forget to say it is a proper hardback book, full color. Yeah. So moving on in other subcategories here. Is it easy and intuitive to read? I would say yes. It's fairly well written. But there is a lot to cover, but that's going to be the same in any mass combat rules. There's a lot you want to cover if you want to have a robust set of mass combat rules. So there are simpler ones, and we've talked about some before, but those err more on the side of generic and just really like fast play ease. This, and we'll talk about it a little bit, I think, is it's got more meat on the bone because they want to do more justice to the periods. The sections, I do feel like, build on each other. They kind of go in the order as you would play the game. The command phase, movement, then range and melee combat, what happens after those, and then into some additional rules and how you set up and play the game. So it is a very kind of intuitive way. I think Warlord is got a lot of experience in writing rules, so I would hope they'd have this recipe down pretty well. It does have lots of diagrams and charts and examples. Maybe not too heavy on the chart side, but it does have lots of really good examples in their diagrams. And I would say this is different than some other rules we reviewed. Some rules are like, oh, okay, here's a chart, here's a diagram. Now I'm going to give you like an example turn and maybe picture it out. Where this is more of like, okay, if you're advancing straight into a unit, or if there's a unit in front of you, here's a chart what that looks like, or a diagram what that looks like. And it kind of goes through all the different mechanics like that. So there's a lot of them in there, but they're super helpful. And there are quite a few, not quite a few, but there are several charts for this set of rules, but they're mostly all consolidated in the quick reference as well, if they're relevant. There are some that are more like setting up how you set up a unit, or like charts for unit sizes and things like that in the relevant section. And then we talk about quick reference sheets or indexes. There isn't an index in this set of rules. There is a table of contents and the rule summary that Kentuckian was talking about, which is phenomenal. It is 16 pages. It does not have page references back to the other sections, which is something I believe Warlord did have in Octoon Panzer, which came out, correct me if I'm wrong, it did come out after Hail Caesar 2nd edition.
Yes.
So that was probably something that they learned, but it is still so nice to have this consolidated. Like, once you've read through the rules, you pretty much just need that rules section, summary section to kind of go through and make sure you're not missing anything. Having page references obviously would have been great. My only ding in this section, before I kick it over to you, Kentuckian, is the quick reference sheets, or kind of the lack thereof. As in every rule review, I am a big proponent for having a really robust, good quick reference sheet. There are two, but it's a quick reference sheet just for ranged attacks and one just for hand-to-hand combat. Then everything else is kind of spread through that 16 pages of summaries. And I feel like if you want a good kind of like overall flow of the game quick reference sheet, you have to kind of look for ones that players have made. So that's literally the only thing I would ding it for in what's in the book, is I don't feel like there's a good cumulative quick reference sheet. What are your thoughts, Kentucky?
You have the one at the, I guess at the back, it says quick reference on it. It's the last, I'm at like 234 and 235.
Yeah, but that's just range attack and hand-to-hand.
Yeah, it's not as much as what you get. The one that you get in the battle sheets is pretty decent. It still isn't like a plug and play with it. It's the same as what you're talking about. And again, not to say that the rules aren't pretty intuitive when it's the blue and red, you go, I go. I still have my printed copy, which is it's the rules summary appendix 4 from the first rule book, and it's pretty same. It's just like the kind of playthrough 16 pages. I've seen people that have made the QRSs. I would agree with everything you kind of said. I would say that's a little bit of a ding. As far as like anything to add from what you said, I do think it's easy and intuitive to read. There are a few like gaping issues, and I think me and you in our games that we've played and games that I've played with everyone else, on the disorder at the end of the turn, I don't think that is written as clear as it could be, because there's a lot of kind of questions surrounding that. And I've even talked to people that are pretty Hail Caesar fans, and they are like, this is how we play it. And I've talked to other gaming groups, and they're like, this is how we play it. So I do understand that. The sections build on each other. The diagrams are pretty helpful, especially the ones where they're bird's eye view. I don't think they had as many bird's eye view from the top down in the last one, or at least that were lined out to some of the more trickier questions that we see in this one. So I'm kind of for all of those. So I add to your stuff, and then I would say the QRS would be a little bit of a ding. And I think the playthrough sheet, the 16 pages, is supposed to kind of take the meat of the QRS, which, I mean, can you really call something that's 16 pages a QRS? Probably not. And then one thing that kind of was very upsetting was the if you go to the Warlord website right now, you can download a FAQ for Hail Caesar, and it's because the errata sheets or the quick reference sheets in the back of the main rulebook are wrong, and it shows you that it used for the skirmishers or for ranged and attack hits. It basically like printed the same ones for the same sheet. And so if you go to the Warlord website, download the FAQ, it's free. But I want to say that was a pretty notable like fix when the rule set came out a few years ago.
Yeah.
A handful of years ago. That it was a quick, just a little bit of editing would have saved them that. But all in all, I'm a huge fan of the hardback book. The beautiful pictures for periods, that I don't even game in there. The examples, the kind of smooth nature of it. I hate big rule sets, and I would consider this a hefty rule set. And it's going to get positive marks for me. And I have to be honest with it though. The 2 or 3 things I mentioned are they deserve some reproach. They deserve some dings, but all in all, pretty well happy.
Yeah.
What do you score it?
Well, before that, there's one thing you mentioned I'd also want to highlight that Warlord is kind of getting away from in some of their rules that came out after this. But 95% of the pictures in there are of painted models on the table. There's some great illustrations, but the focus on photos and models is something I love. Like, it just inspires me to want to paint models more than just regular illustrations. And I know in some of their more recent rules, they've gone very heavily into the illustration side of things. And I think I was actually critical of that in one of our reviews because I want, it's a war game set of rules. I want pictures of wargaming models and setups, and this is chocked full of it. It's great. I love it. So, scoring.
Totally agree. The only thing I'll add to that is that one thing I did notice, especially when the Ancient Medieval, they have a lot of Perry miniatures in there. What I noticed from the first Hail Caesar edition was they had a lot of pictures of models from all different manufacturers, and they seem to have cleaned that up a little bit with, this is 99% or 90% at least Warlord models, which is different from the first one. I did enjoy kind of seeing, that they painted other miniature manufacturers in there, but again, they're a company trying to sell their products, so just worth note. What's the score?
So I gave it one of my highest, 9.5.
Holy cow.
I dinged them the
Awesome.
point for me just in this section because the rules breakdowns that you mentioned I kind of ding in another section, but just book layout, like I can't ask for a better book. Yes, the fact that you really, for the quick reference, you need to go to the Reddit is kind of a ding. But other than that, like, I absolutely love this style of wargaming rulebook. I think all wargaming rulebooks should be in a similar style if you have the budget to do something like that. If you don't, obviously, I don't want a company to go under because they can't do this. But this is like the gold standard for how a rulebook should look, in my opinion. What about you?
Me and you go back and forth, and it's great. Sometimes we align, sometimes we don't. We've been pretty candid with the audience. We enjoyed this rule set, and we've been critical of it here already with the QRS. I might not be as much as the Candyman as you, but I do agree. I mean, I co-sign everything you said. I'm going to give it an 8.5. And the things that I think hold it back from the 9 category would definitely be some of the nuances when we talked about disorder and how things interact with the rules, there is just a little bit of a better, could have been written better, could have made more sense, could have been in the process a little bit better. And then the QRS, I think, is something that I always count the 16 pages as a QRS. I do. And I play it like it's a QRS. I'll quick flip to it. Hey, I'm doing a range attack. What are the other modifiers again for it? Looking right through that, and I'm treating it. But to do that to people who are not familiar with the rules and you're trying to host it at a convention or you're trying to run a Hail Caesar game with people that have never played it, that can be disconcerting. Handing them a 16-page paper and saying, hey, you might need to look into these while we're playing. So
That's fair.
8.5, 9.5. I still think we're both kind of on the same page there. So moving on, because there's a lot of stuff that we're wanting to talk about in this rule set. What is the rule set trying to achieve? Remember, we're going for 1 through 10. Obviously, closer you are to 10, better. 1, we're hurting. So what we look for and what is the rule set trying to achieve? We've always added this in our analysis to rule sets because we're trying to put ourselves in the same kind of place as what the author is getting at, what the company is getting at. And some companies are historical granularity, some are trying to sell models. What is it trying to achieve? And so a couple of outlines to just go through this section would be, what is its goal? Is it fun? Is it a skirmish game? Is it a bigger game? Who is the intended audience? Does it meet the goal? What shortfalls in the goal? What is its goal? I think its goal is to give you rank and flank, moderately sized armies for 28 millimeter, biblical to medieval, and a fun game. I would have to say that lighthearted fun game with the historical flavor is kind of how I see Hail Caesar. And let me be very clear, because I've watched rules reviews on Hail Caesar before. I've seen people talk about Hail Caesar, and I've seen people talk about other rule sets. And I think it's important to kind of interject here about what other rule sets might be trying to achieve. Me and Wyndehurst have played, dozens of other ancient games, whether they be skirmish or kind of this rank and flank combat that we see at Hail Caesar getting at. We've played Ancient Hannibal, we've played WAB, Warhammer Ancient Battles, kind of all of the big ones, especially. And so, in my mind, I think the goal for some of those is, hey, I want to be a little bit more of a tournament-based game, or hey, I want to be, I've played WRG. Hey, I want to be as historical as I can, but tournament-based, or I want all the granularity in the world. And for me, I think this more outlines all three of what I think are the big areas for what I am looking forward to wargaming. And that's, I love historical wargaming. I love researching the color palettes on shields, on weapon systems. What are the what's the difference in the Roman pilum? Why is it so effective? How are elephants used? What is the pike used? Where does this battle go astray? How can I replicate that in ancient combat? And for me, with the flavor, the historical flavor, and the fun aspect of it, I think it's getting there. Who is the intended audience? I personally think it can be for the historical person that enjoys, a fun historical game in about 2 hours, with moderate-sized armies. I don't think they're mega huge armies, because Wyndehurst, if you did, Romans are on my mind right now. So if you did a Caesarian Roman army and you had 10 units of legionnaires at 16 men each unit, that would be 160 guys, and plus a unit of horse and skirmishers, you're well under 200 models, and you've got an army for the table. 200 guys is nothing that I would say is a monstrosity on a 6x4 or an 8x4 or whatever you're able to play on. So me and Wyndehurst, to some degree, even though we love Hail Caesar, we've kind of increased our ranks in our games of Hail Caesar just because we're masochists and we like painting more miniatures, and we've done that. Does it meet the goal? Yes, I think so. I think it meets the flavor of the goal. You have 2 or 3, you'll have flavorful rules for those armies. You'll have Pelum, you'll have, Warband, you'll have Pike Block, you'll have those things. You'll have the wedge formation and charges, and you have all that. What shortfalls are in the goal? And this is where I want to spend some time. I'll probably address these questions real quick on what I think the shortfalls are, Wyndehurst, and I'll hand them over to you to kind of address what you think of those outline that we just did, and then I kind of want to split the baby on it and the other ancient rule sets. And so, what are the shortfalls? A lot of people, just like with Chain of Command or other rule sets, hey, do you like the way that reinforcements are done? Do you like the way phases work? And you either love it or you hate it. And Wyndehurst had told me this even right before we came on air, is the same thing with the command rolls in Hail Caesar. I am tired of listening to people. I just watched a rules review the other day of Hail Caesar, and it was somebody who was an ancient historian, and he was like, I hate that. My models are sitting there and they're not doing what I want. And I'm like, I don't know where that guy got his degree from. And I think I've got 4 graduate degrees right now. I feel pretty well studied. I love ancient history. And for you to think that you're going to be able to snap your fingers and people are going to just move on the other side of the field exactly how you want, and you haven't built some redundancy into your plan or your battle lines or issuing a general order, I just think that's so far from the truth. How many times have we looked back through ancient history and battles break down because of miscommunication? And everybody, I think, that plays a war game, and maybe it's the immediate gratification of being in the modern era right now, is just like, oh snap, and these guys run and turn and flank, and when you put all that stuff together, I just don't see it. And I love the roles, the command roles for, like, again, the lowest generals normally in the game are like 8 or less. And you're saying you're going to fail like maybe 1 or 2 orders, you get a reroll, general reroll. Like, is that going to matter too much? Yeah, it can definitely make or break a game, and it can definitely have some expectations into it. But if you're fighting on the flank, if you're doing something else, you're trying to maneuver different units, and you're rolling more dice to break those units apart. Like in ancient combat, you do not have headsets with radios to your Hypsipus or to your phalangites over here. Like, they're not going to be able to do that. So sometimes it's on the impetus of the commander. So I think that's one thing Hail Caesar really gets reamed on. And I just think it's totally inappropriate, because I love the feel of it. I feel like I'm I have the pride and hubris, like I'm some ancient commander, right? I'm Pyrrhus of Epirus, or I'm Caesar, and I'm like, that commander over there, I hope it's Labienus. If I'm Caesar, I hope he's going to do the thing on the wing that I need him to do. Oh, dang, he's a Senate political appointee. He's not doing that, or he's not, he's being very cautious, or he's doing something else with the guys. And I think that shortfall is, it's undeserved, and I just find people that are never like kind of on the fence on this. They either love it or hate it. The only thing else I would say with the shortfall that I see people say are, it does have a point system, okay? And what we've talked about the rules, and when people talk about points, they're like, oh, well, you're trying to meta chase and you're trying to do anything else like that. I have never seen another rule set where Rick Priestley writes in the rule set, hey, this is for fun. We've given these army lists as a rough outline for how you can play the game. But please add to, take away, do what you need to do to make the system, more apparent. And I think it's very unfair to say somebody is going to go through 4,000 years of history and you're going to be like, well, they didn't do this exact specific thing over here. No, it meets the intent. I think it gets the goal for historical flavor and fun. And me and Wyndehurst, we've written scenarios back and forth now to each other where we've added rules that are like, hey, we're wanting to do this battle at Cynocephaly, or we're wanting to do this engagement over here. Let's make a special rule, or let's add this to the unit, or let's add the unit that we want, that we know is historically there in this person's army, is not listed in the army list book, but it's listed somewhere else in the army list. So let's just take it and push it over there. And I think there's no issue with that. And like Rick Priestley lines it out And I've seen Rick Priestley even, we'll probably talk this a little bit more about author, but I've seen him come online when people ask questions. So the shortfalls I want to be candid about. I think the command role, like people will end up saying like I can't have fun if this rule set's designed for fun. Like that's not fun to me. And I think, man, you're playing the game pretty serious. Or I would say you have a high expectation for levy infantry in the ancient world to react to what your commands are, and then the points, and everything else. I think it's good guidelines and flavor, but I still think it knocks the what it's trying to achieve out of the park. What about you, Wyndehurst? That was a long diatribe. Go ahead, interject.
Yeah. Well, so my goal, what the goal I think it's trying to achieve, is very similar to yours. I wrote it out as an accessible mass combat rules set for the biblical to kind of like early black powder era, early guns era, and that's why I think their intention was they wanted to be accessible for this wide breadth of history, and it's meant to be fun mass combat game that is flexible for such a large span of history, both flexible in that you can have varying army count. So I mean, we were talking before we started recording about how you're sizing your Romans. And, I changed the sizing from my Anglo-Saxon and Norman armies for something that worked for me. And as long as the frontage is close, the rules are fine with it. There's a range you can have in there. Some rules are very strict, like, okay, this is your frontage. And then you can have as many models as you want. Or other mass battle rules are like, you must have X number of ranks for this type of unit. And I feel like Hail Caesar's a lot more flexible in that regard. I think the intended audience is people who love historical battles, but they don't want a simulation. They don't want it to be super, super crunchy, but they also want to make sure it's not too generic that it doesn't feel appropriate for like a mass combat in the ancient world. And I think they meet that goal. I think the shortfalls that Kentuckian mentioned, I know those are shortfalls other people claim. I mean, I didn't put them on my shortfalls. I'll save my comments for the command role when we talk about rules. But the shortfalls for me was the QRS, or the lack kind of thereof, only because I feel like because it is a bulky set of rules, or it's a larger set of rules, not having a really streamlined, convenient QRS does kind of affect that ability for easy, fun, quick play. Originally, I had thought maybe the list was kind of one, because there's not a specific army list in the core book, but there's one army list book supplement that covers everything. There's some example army lists in the rule books, as well as there's a breakdown for types of units, like light archers, medium archers, heavy archers, and their stats. And as Kentuckian said, just pulling from different like the rules almost encourage you, like, don't hold the army list we give you as like the gold standard. Here's the unit types. If we don't have it in there, here's examples, use those. I feel like the rules really encourage that level of flexibility in army building, and the points don't feel like, well, we're trying to make it a strictly competitive game. Because I know that's often the criticism for points is, oh, you just want it to be competitive and tournament based. I've always ever used the points just to help me kind of pick a target, like army size, especially if I'm building for my Normans, Anglo-Saxons, I wanted comparable armies. So the points helped in that. Now, I didn't hold it strictly. I still wanted to make sure that the armies felt the way I wanted in the field, but the points were a nice guideline. And I think it's most prevalent in Hail Caesar, because one of the arguments people have given me for having points is convenience for pickup games. And I feel like that's true. I mean, I would probably never do Normans versus Caesarian Romans, but if that's the only two armies that Kentucky and I happen to have and we wanted to play a game, we could. We could use the points to build out comparable forces, and we could play a game. And I think that it's just to help make them more accessible to people. Another thing is accessibility there. So you mentioned that it's a 28 mil game. I do think it's intended for 28 millimeter. However, they did change this from first to second edition because second edition talked about playing it in other scales and how to convert the base sizes and stuff down to other scales. They did kind of. I think I couldn't find it in the second edition. They do have a section.
Oh yeah, they say that in the first edition, but then also I think the Epic scale with it coming out.
That's true.
I mean, just like you see with Epic Black Powder. I mean, they sell its own Epic rulebook, which really cabbages a lot of Hail Caesar 2 and brings it to the Epic table with some nuance and variation. There's one point that I think you nailed with the tournament based. I mean, can you name another ancient mass combat game out there, mid-grade to mass combat game, that's popular, that isn't just mainly made for the tournament scene? Like Warhammer Ancient Battles tournament scene, Lartiger tournament scene. I mean, it just is. Nobody's going to tell me it's not. WRG from the past, Warrior, what it's called now, tournament scene. To the strongest with the grids. I don't know if there's. I've seen it played at conventions. I've kind of walked through it. It turned me off because it seemed like, big chess, which I get the strategic geometry of the battle line that you want to replicate in Ancient Combat, but that's, you read too much in Ancient Combat about the massive flank movement or the massive kind of penetration and poking through that line to just make it a rugby scrum, which I know Ancient Combat is. I'm not saying it's not, but there's a little bit variation that I just don't like how that game handrails that. But I think most games are set up for like a tournament kind of base game, and I think you nailed that point. Like the point system is not for that. It's to kind of keep it fair. So you didn't be like, hey, I'm going to play you in Romans and you're going to be Carthaginians. I'm going to bring 20 units. Oh, you're bringing 50? Well, we should have something that says like, hey, let's play in and around these amount of points. I think that's kind of what it's used for, in a little bit in fairness. But I think that's a great point that just needs to, totally shows that I don't think it's made for the tournament scene. It is made for casual play, scenarios. We played scenarios with it and historical flavor and a good game in 2 hours. Can't beat it. Keep going. I just thought that was a great point you made.
Yeah, and so I don't think there's a lot of shortfalls in achieving the goal. I think the problem with the QRS and, like you had mentioned, Kentuckian, some of the ambiguity in some of the rules makes it feel like you have to do a little bit more work to get to that fun game initially, which you also mentioned can be challenging for new players getting into it. But, I mean, I was playing Hail Caesar first edition before I even knew Hail Caesar was a rule set. I mean, I showed up at the club back in 11 to 13, 11 to 14, 2011, 2014 in England with my local, club. And we're like, hey, we're playing Ancients. I was like, all right, well, what are my forces? And I didn't know, but we were playing Hail Caesar. And I mean, they literally just walked me through it, what I need to do here. And, I mean, I was having a blast. So it's one set that if it... And I'll talk about this some in the next section, but I feel like if you're playing with somebody who, it's very easy to teach because I can walk you through it and just tell you this is what you need to do at this point, and you're going to enjoy it. It doesn't feel like, well, I have no idea what's going on. I'm just kind of reacting. I'm still having fun. But yeah, I didn't have anything else to say about what they're trying to achieve. You want to give us your score first?
I think I'm gonna knock this one out of the park, and I'm gonna to the haters that say like, hey, it doesn't do any of them well if it's not totally for fun and it tries to add some flavor, but it's a lot of the people that I think throwing rocks at it are it's kind of a bastardization of in the middle of trying to split the baby, and that's what I think it does perfectly. I think it achieves that goal. That's really what I'm looking for. I don't want a million different types of infantry based off, some nuance that you knew that this unit had scale armor versus this. I'd like to play the game to get the flavor of what the infantry and the command was of the time. And for the people that are just so nitpicky on saying, well, this unit isn't moving or it's moving a lot slower for one turn I had to sit out, that happens. I apologize. That happens in Ancient Combat. Like, you can see that. So I give it a 9. I think it hits the nail on the head, and it's definitely fun and intuitive. And I think it's a 9 for me, which is super high for me. Rarely give out 9s, but 9 for me on what is the goal.
Yeah, I agree. And when you were talking about the communication thing for Ancient Battle, I mean, you can speak to this better than most people, but even in modern combat, communication goes right out the window so often. Even if you've got, earphones in and a direct line to the commander, following and communicating clear orders is so challenging. How much more challenging would it have been back then with hundreds of thousands of troops? And you and I have played, I think, this rule set between the two of us more than any together. Yep. We've done biblical, we've done ancient, and we've done either together or individually medieval and dark ages. And every period, it feels appropriate. And we talked about this in other rules, like, oh, here's another set of skirmish rules that covers how well does it do. And I mean, you'd be hard pressed, I think, to find another set of ancient rules that gets enough of it right to capture the feel for each of those periods. So I also
3,500 years,
yeah. I also gave it a 9 because I think it really does a good job of hitting that sweet spot for me. And I will respect, when we did our bolt action versus chain of command, they had very different mechanics, and you either loved some of them or you hated them. And if it's something is just not for you, I respect that. But you don't have to throw shade. I mean, I didn't throw shade at chain of command. There were mechanics in chain of command that weren't for me, but I'm not going to say they're a bad set of rules. That's just not for me. So I do feel like, though, when it comes to ancient mass battles, people have a favorite, and they're very reluctant to move away from that. And I feel like the main reason that is because a lot of mass battle ancient rules have very strict guidelines in units basing. Hail Caesar even has a note about how to use pre-existing armies in Hail Caesar that don't perfectly conform to it. So they're saying, it doesn't matter how you base it before. Don't rebase it for us. You can still use it. And so I think they really did a good job of trying to be as accessible as possible and capture the flair. So I think both of our scores reflect that. But as Kentuckian said, we have a lot more to cover. So moving on. And some of this next section we've kind of hit on. So gatekeeping, the entry threshold for the system. So what we'll be talking about here are the mechanics that hurt or help new players, that make gatekeeping less of a thing or more of a thing. The cost of models, specific size or manufacturer, because some rules are like, hey, you can only play with this, and it must be this, or else you can't play with it. And then books and supplements. The rules, the company that shall not be named likes to push out supplements and rules every single year, and I hear that community complain and lament about it because it makes it so hard and frustrating. So we'll talk about how Hail Caesar does. So first, what gatekeeping mechanics help or hurt new players. A lot of times we see this specifically in, does it have bespoke dice or charts or tokens that you have to play the game and get from them. And I've often been very critical of games that have bespoke items, because if you want your game to last, you have to make sure those things are available in stock. Hail Caesar does require about 2 to 3 token types, but they're very generic. We're talking about shaken, disordered, and broken. Huge numbers of ancient mass battle rules use those exact tokens, so it's nothing there that really stops it. There's no command dice or anything specifically you need for this set of rules.
D6s, yeah, just D6s.
Just D6s. So. And those 3 tokens. And maybe a casualty marker or an extra D6 to track stamina. And so there's nothing really physical to limit you or gatekeep you. And then I don't think there's any rules or mechanics that would necessarily gatekeep that make it so complicated it's hard to understand. when we talk about kind of playability and rules, I think we'll really hit on the command mechanic. Kentuckian's already alluded to some. I wouldn't say that's gatekeeping because it doesn't prevent play. It's something either you like or you don't. Cost of models. Like Kentuckian said, in the first edition, they had loads of photos from other manufacturers. Warlord didn't have as robust a range then. Their range is much more robust now. So, but it's ancients, and it's 28 mil target. You can get those in plastic from number of sources. You can get those in metals from number of sources, and you can 3D print them from numbers of sources. So there is no gatekeeping when it comes into getting access to models. They don't have to be a specific size. You can do 28s, you can do 25s, you can do 20s, or smaller if you really want to. Obviously, you'd want, I think anything less than 25, you would want to make sure both armies are comparable. But 25 to 28, 25 to 32 millimeter, you could fight against each other or mix in the same army if you really want. If that doesn't get your ADHD going. So there's no gatekeeping, I think, when it comes to models or size of manufacturer. So yes, you can play with other manufacturers' minis. There's photos of it in the first rule book before they had a robust range. And then finally, books, supplements, and new editions. So first edition was published in 2011. Second edition came out, 2 years ago? 3 years ago.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, it's I think like 2.5 now. I want to say it was like in November of 22, 23, somewhere around in there.
Yeah.
So I mean, 10 years plus since the first edition. That's pretty solid.
That's pretty solid. They had several individual supplements for period army lists, which is now consolidated in a single one. So you only need the rule book and that one supplement, and you're good to go. They have supplements for more like campaigns, which you don't need unless you really want some like curated, battles for a specific period or campaign, and they're actively working on those. You don't need them otherwise. So it's not prohibitive at all. You can get just the book and that supplement and any models you want in that scale. So I would say the only thing that could be gatekeeping, which is going to be a problem for any mass combat rules, is just number of models. Literally, I was posting a picture recently. Someone was like, "Oh yeah, I'm working on some Normans for Saga, but I don't know if I could go full Hail Caesar." And I was like, my Normans and Anglo-Saxons started as a Saga skirmish force, and then I just added to it. And you don't need to add that many to have a playable game of Hail Caesar. Obviously, I wanted to go to enough so 6 players could play, and that's still total for both armies, I think, is just around or under 500 models. That's for 2 armies for 6 players. That's hard to get in other mass combat set of rules. So yeah, I would say there is very, very little gatekeeping. The rules are current and available to buy. The Warlord doesn't seem to have any intention of getting rid of it anytime soon. So yeah, those are really my thoughts on gatekeeping. Kentuckian, what about you?
I co-sign everything you said. I just don't want to rehash it. I agree with the tokens. I agree with the cost of models. Like, even me and you went Habsies on a 3D print STLs that came out. So like you can really kind of get into this specific size of manufacturer. I think when me and my old man started playing this well over a decade ago, we used the old WRG kind of outline that he had, like light infantry's 3, and then your heavy infantry's the 4-person rank on the whatever it is, 80 millimeter, 20, 40, 60, 80, 80 millimeter stand and whatnot. And so we had a good time as long as the frontages were same. So I think it's pretty conducive to that. And using other scales manufacturers, like I have played a game, I think, where one of us had a decent like War Games Foundry and the other was using minifigs, and it worked out. There was no issue. The only thing that I would say is like negative in the gatekeeping is if you put the rulebook, I think the rulebook is around like $56. The army list that gets you all the way into Crusaders and everything else is around $50, somewhere like that. So $100, you basically have everything you need. Most of the supplements that you're going to buy, So if you're a biblical gamer and you want the scenarios and stuff, like around $40, $50, $150, you kind of have your period ranked out and everything, and you just have loads and loads of variations. But I think, uh, under $100 and you have every list that they have out there, you can't beat that for what you're talking about wargaming. We're again 35, 3,500 years, like human history basically. Um, it's pretty amazing. My only other knock is, we'll talk this a little bit more mechanics. The only thing that I think gatekeeping it would be is, and I don't want to really touch on here, Epic Hail Caesar, I want to say is its own thing. This rules review, and let me be very clear, like we're going through the 28 millimeter Hail Caesar 2 kind of review. Okay, so I think there's other ways to get into Hail Caesar. I've seen people use the Bacchus minis for it. I've seen people use the Epic miniatures, and there's another rule set that's kind of written to expand on those and how to play those. I'm looking at this as like the 28 millimeter, and I think the one of the biggest things that I would say is gatekeeping is the amount of minis you need to play a good game. And you can play bolt action, right, with 2 to 3 weapons teams and a 250 point game of bolt action. I think you can. I don't think it is where the rule set shines, and I don't think it, will show you all the coolness of the rule set. And I know we talked a lot with Pete, Pete from Bella Ludi. He wrote the rule set for Hail Caesar's Gallic Wars. He wrote skirmish scenarios kind of in there where you're talking about mainly a division versus division. I think those are fun. I think those are thematic. Those are quick games. Where I see the sweet spot for Hail Caesar is around 300 to 350 points based on the army list. And when you're looking at that, that's anywhere from 150 to 250 somewhere models on a side. And so, that can be daunting. And so I kind of want to put it the inverse as gatekeeping as, you will have a decent amount of models on the table comparatively if you're a Saga player or if you're something like that. I'm telling you right now, it's well worth the adventure. And Warlord Victrix does have decently well-priced models, depending on the tariffs in the United States. Just order enough and you'll get them for free if they do that in shipping. But the Hail Caesar, the Caesarian Starter Army, 100 models, like you basically have somewhere in that range of an army. You pick up a cav unit or something else or another box of Legionnaires and you're there and you're like $150. So $250 to have a whole side completely done with some variation in 28 millimeter gaming, that's pretty cheap comparatively. So the only thing I put as gatekeeping is it's definitely not your skirmish game if you're used to like, oh, I can buy a box and I can get by with that. No, I think there's some decent painting, or you're going to have to buy a commission painter or something like that. And I don't say that to throw people away. Like, you can do this. You eat an elephant one bite at a time, and that I really enjoy it. But I definitely think that could keep some people away who, come in, paint your models. I'll play with you while you're painting on them. Come on, it'll be fun. But I would say in between that and I know a lot of people have hemmed and hawed about the supplements, being too much. I still think it's minimal threshold for what we see out there.
Yeah, and my pushback, but you kind of covered it out. So with your last statement there, what you've seen out there, I wouldn't call it gatekeeping to say you do need a lot of models, and models cost money, so you're going to be spending more money than a skirmish game. It's a mass combat game. There is no mass combat game out there worth playing, in my opinion, that's not going to require a lot of models. So if you are a skirmish gamer and you do want to get into mass combat, then that's just a reality of it. I wouldn't necessarily go so far as to call it gatekeeping. And on the opposite, I would say that Hail Caesar is more flexible for people getting into it because they're less strict in the basing and numbers of models per base and units, that you can grow your army as you go. You know, you could use 6 cavalry, three by 3 or 3 by 2 for a cavalry unit to start off with while you're working on it. And then, you know, so if you get a pack of 12, you could have that as 2 units. And then as you build and your army and accumulate, now that 12 could become 1 unit if you want a bigger looking. And I don't think you really see that flexibility in any other mass combat rules I've played. But Kentuckian is right. If you are coming to mass battles, having never done mass battles from skirmish, you do need to understand that it is more expensive. But I'd even push back.
I'm not saying I totally agree with you, and I agree with your pushbacks. But my thing is, I would wrap them. It's great when we disagree, audience. Yeah. I love this because you know. But I would say, like, there is a mental mindset between whether you commission them, and if you have the money to do that, more power to you. But painting 30 models for a platoon or for whatever, a cohort, whatever you're going to do, versus painting 150 models and how you're going to get after that. And, you know, I would say, here's my footnote for our War Games Project episodes on how we attack those things. And I'd say get after that if you're somebody that's curious. I still think it's well worth the endeavor into it.
Yes.
But I think just based on the nature of a mass combat, and again, you know, we're not saying that there's, me and Wyndehurst, you can tell our bias in this because we've painted more miniatures than our units in Hail Caesar require because we like the look of it. Like, so if that tells you anything about us, like, we're going to lean that way. I have to understand that not all of you will agree with me on that. And so you're like, okay, my Roman unit's like a 24-man unit when the rule set calls for a 16-man unit. And so, geez, you're talking about me painting, you know, additional 8 models. Well, that's cool, but you say times 10, you know, that's 80 models additionally that I'm painting that the rule set doesn't require.
So remember in the scouting report when he's complaining about all these models he hasn't painted, he's doing it to himself.
Yeah, I'm a masochist. But I just want to put it out there. I think we beat the dead horse, but I agree with your points. I think it's, you know, you do have to stand on what the rule set is wanting to stand on. And for the books, for the history, for the flavor and everything, if you're a biblical to ancient to medieval nerd, like, you're going to want some of that in there anyways. And it's really cool. It's flavorful. So I'll go ahead and score mine. I see it as, again, it's a high marks for gatekeeping. You know, I'm going to say 8.4. And the only reason I'm kind of going down from 9 and everything is a few tokens, a decent amount. You know, you purchase the army book and the biblical list. You know, we're going to talk about how other people's make lists and there are other things that are out there. I don't want to bring it up now during gatekeeping. And then those scenario books. Like, I will say, they came out with an Ancient Caesar a long time ago. Now they've since come out with, you know, the Gallic Wars of Caesar, and there's about to be a Caesar Civil War set come out. Oops, no, you've heard it here first, kids. Me and Wyndehurst helped on the project, so I'm super excited when that one drops. But even the Mithratic Wars and Pontus came out here not too long ago. So a lot of cool stuff if you have little niches in this ancient kind of period to look at. I'm really, you know, I hope Warlord does Alexander and the successors, because they do, I think, some of the best pike models on the face of the earth. They're cheapest. I love Foundry, but dang, they're expensive.
They are. So
I give it 8.4. What do you give it, Wyndehurst?
I gave it another 9.5 because I really don't see. I don't see any gatekeeping problems really for a mass combat set of rules. I mean, even the rule books, like, you only need to buy, if you love historical ancient battles and like it's your jam, you only need the main rule book because it tells you all the stats for unit types. It just doesn't have army lists. But if you don't care about the army lists and you want to build your own, that's fine. And then if you really want army lists, you only need one book. You only really need those 2 books, and everything else is just gravy. And then, I mean, the tokens I bought that I use weren't even designed for Hail Caesar. They're designed for some other game because they're the same tokens used by most of the historical mass battles out there. So I don't feel like there's really any reason that you all would have an excuse not to get this game and start playing it, because it's
Awesome.
I love it.
Awesome.
So why don't you take us on to the next category?
Okay, so next we're going to talk playability. We're going to start kind of streamlining this. We're going to get into the fun stuff when we get to playability and rules mechanics. Playability is going to be self-explanatory, so I think we should be able to get in and out of this one pretty fast. So again, the questions that we always ask when we're reviewing a rule set on playability. How long before you have the system? Is it 1 to 2 turns, 1 to 2 games? Can you finish the game in 1 to 2 hours, a day, a weekend? Long setup, tear down, putting models out. Does the result normally fit the game or desired achievement? You know, like, is that what you're going for here? So, how long before you have the system? I think this is the one that is a little bit... I don't think it's a 1 to 2 turn game before you have the system. I would really recommend playing Division v Division and then moving up to, 2 divisions, playing 2 divisions, and then going from there. I think the rules are streamlined and they're playable. I think you're going to have to read through the rule book one good time. And I think you're going to have to at least understand and think about those concepts and how the proximity rule works. We're going to get there when we talk about mechanics, when we talk about commands, and then we talk about breakthrough charges and some other things. I think it's going to take you 1 or 2 games to really get it down. But trust me, I think once you have it, and it is very intuitive, I think then you're gonna you will never need to look at the rule book again. You'll be playing off that 16-page paper once you have it down. Can you finish the game in 1 to 2 hours a day or weekend? I think you can get a 350-point game in 2 hours. I easily, me and Wyndehurst have played dozens of 350-point. I'm just trying to think of that when you said it earlier. Like, how many games have Hellseed played? I'm not anywhere near triple digits, but I'd have to say if I've played it at least 1 to 5 times a year from its inception, 10 plus years. I mean, I could easily see there's sometimes, where we've gotten 3 games of it like in a weekend. And, I've played, when my old man comes, we always normally get 1 or 2 games. So I'd say I'm at 30 plus easily, maybe 40. Easily in the amount of time that I've played it. Now, again, this is using old armies for the first few years of that from WRG, but still doing it. So I feel I'm pretty seasoned in it, but again, I will say it's not something that I play regularly, like some of the skirmish games that I know people are playing that I can find an opponent who knows it very well. But I'm still playing it at least a half dozen to a dozen times a year. I would say that's easy. And it's always good to kind of go back to the rule set and make sure I have it. Long setup, tear down, putting models out. I do not think it depends. I'll say the only kind of caveat to that, the table for ancient combat, even if you're putting hills up, if you're putting a river or something like that, not a lot to it. And if you give your variation, I think I can get every ancient table we've come up with, and me and Wyndehurst, when we played multiple games in iteration and we moved hills around, maybe 5 minutes. I think based on how you base your army may matter on your setup time. And if you're all individually based, don't have movement trays, could be an issue. Like you're going off a Saga army without movement trays. Me and Wyndehurst, I know we've both gone to movement trays, and I think that I think our setup time's probably 5 or 10 minutes. I think the only thing that me and him do is we're bad at coming up with points before we're playing, or we'll have a general idea, and sometimes if me and him are playing or we're hosting each other, the person who's hosting is coming up with the list, and then they're like, hey, let's change that a little bit and let's switch some stuff up. I still think it's pretty quick. The movement trays, very quick and tear down for a mass battle game where you're talking several hundred minis aside. Does the result normally fit the game or desired achievement? Yes, I would say, because you have some breakthrough. There have been times where I think, just like anything, the game and the dice, the whole idea behind dice is you're going to have the oddity that comes out where you have my Carthaginian citizen infantry just mops up a unit of Triarii because I roll, out my butt. And you're that happens, but I'll say over half the time or majority of the time you're getting you're seeing decent tactics, historically flavored tactics play out. for Ancient Combat. Um, we'll get to this a little bit with the rules mechanics, but I will say I just have to mention it on playability. I think there are some people that are gonna hate some of the new scenario books, we've talked to Peter about this, about how they've almost seemed like division fights. It's like 4 units versus 4 units, which is really a wing or a center in Hail Caesar. It's not a fight itself, but I think those games can really have some great playability to them, and I think you can play those scenarios and still see some pretty great playability. So I'm out there. I don't want to touch on right now about the scenarios in the book and how those can add to the playability and those things. I just think as far as like having the system down, it's going to be a intuitive system. It's going to be quick. I think you can get it pretty easy, but I do think it's going to take 1 to 2 games. But after you have that, Wyndehurst, like me and you normally never go book.
Yeah.
We look at the 16-page sheet, and we've been playing it for years against each other. So it's going to take you one read through, and then I think you're good to go. Definitely get a game in 2 to 3 hours, 1 to 2 hours. I think if 300 points, something like that. Me and Wyndehurst always talk in the middle of our games, so they go on forever. Set up and tear down. I think unfortunately, it's how you base your models. And I do think we get a lot of historical flavor out of our scenarios. And so I feel like that's a good thing. The only thing I want to push back against, and at least I guess add here, which you might not be able to with other rule sets, is Warlord has so many different periods that they game. There is the skeleton of Black Powder and Pike and Shot in how they do command rolls, and how you have the blunder and the command. We'll talk a little bit of that in mechanics. And so I think if you play those periods, my old man, he played hundreds of different rule sets growing up, and he's getting older. He's late 70s, and so the idea is like, for him, he loves playing all those ancient periods. He loves historical characters that are larger in life, from Napoleonics to ancients to whatever, and he's leaning more toward Warlord rule sets. Even if people will knock on different aspects of them, the fact that they're pretty similar in the sense on how they do commands, how they do movement, how they do issuing orders, and some of those things, he enjoys the fact that those supplements have little variation. So I do think if you're a Pike and Shot or Black Powder player and you haven't given Hail Caesar a try, but you're thinking about it, you will probably get more playability out of it. It's not something that really should be added to this period, but I wanted to bring it up because those rule sets are pretty big and popular throughout the globe, so that may affect you. What about you for playability, Wyndehurst, as you steam through this one?
That's a very good point. The similarity. I don't think it's any secret that Hail Caesar is probably my favorite mass combat set of rules, and I would say the close second is Belludi, because Belludi is really it's really Hail Caesar for people new to wargaming, and which is like why it's also one of my favorites, because I'll start brand new people to wargaming on that, and then bring them to this when I want to start to really get more of that flavor and everything. But I agree, we've been playing this a lot, so if I'm playing mass combat rules, it's usually Hail Caesar. I do think it would take, I said, about 3+ games to really get comfortable with the rules. I think your suggestion of starting with just a division and then moving up is a good one. Some of that taking time is, I think, the lack of a really good QRS, because you kind of feel like you have to go back through that 16 pages, and that kind of slows gameplay a little bit. I think we also tend to always play a minimum 3 divisions when you and I play. And so our games, and I base this off most of my games, which is usually 3 divisions aside, and usually with a friend that we BS a lot. And so we're usually wrapping a game up in under 4 hours, I'd say, depending on your dice. If you both roll your command dice really bad and guys aren't moving around very much, your game might be a little longer than others. But I don't think that is a knock on the game. And when we get to mechanics, I'll go into more depth why. But yeah, I'd say maybe 3+ games to kind of get real comfortable with the rules. Larger games like we normally play under 4 hours. It's funny, for setup and teardown, I literally wrote the same thing. It depends on how you base your army, because there really isn't very much terrain for mass combat games, because that's historically they didn't fight on terrain heavy battlefields if they could help it. So your typical game won't have a whole huge amount of terrain. And I have seen people who play with larger armies than I do, and they're all individually based without trays, because that's what they like. They like moving individuals. If it's on trays and you keep it well, your army's well organized, it's very quick to roll it out. Really, what helps you, and like Kentuckian said, is we don't pregame very much. And so we're kind of like showing up and like, hey, we want to do this. Okay, well, let's try and put two balanced forces together real quick. You really can help yourself out in Hail Caesar if you do take some pregame time, especially because there are special rules for some units and weapon special rules. And so it behooves you to make note of those in your army list ahead of time before you sit down to actually play, so you don't have to reference that as much. You know what it is you're working with, and that really speeds up your play. Because there's spin games we've had, it's like, oh, wait a minute, don't those guys have long spears? I'm pretty sure that gives a bonus of some kind. Well, let me flip through the rules and find it. Whereas had we done proper pregame and make notes for ourselves, you eliminate a lot of that. I think it does.
I've started to do that now, just because I think me and you have had. I think the pregame for your list, especially, I just would co-sign that. That is important, and it probably takes 2 to 3 minutes to write those special rules down. Like, hey, these are going to be used in this game. Just, hey, look at them during my attack, melee phase, whatever.
Yeah, and I think the result does fit the desired achievement, and we'll talk about this more into the mechanics, but I don't care if a whole wing doesn't. I mean, so all the games we've played, we've had games everywhere from neither army did much, and it's a fun game. So I think it really behooves you to kind of get in the mindset of, I am an individual commander with sub-commanders who I might not agree with. They might hate my guts, which is very historically on flavor. There was lots of rivalries between commanders all the way up until today. You often have conflicts with very weird results because Commander A hates Commander B and wants him to fail regardless of the overall outcome. Hopefully it happens less often with, in the Western world. But it does happen. And so I think if you embrace that flavor of commanders not listening, the confusion of battle, commanders having different rivalries, and play that up in your game, like that you're sitting here and, that General such and such on the left flank, why isn't he moving his division forward? I commanded him to do so, and he's sitting there not doing anything. To me, it's still a fun game, and so it very much hits the desired effect, I think. So you want to score us first?
Yeah, my score would be on playability would be a 9.2. I'm in the 9s.
Well, finally.
What do you got?
I had a 9, just a straight 9. I think, it's really solid for me.
I'll kick it back over.
Yeah.
We're almost we're at the halfway point. Rules.
Okay, so this is, I think, where we normally spend the bulk of our time. So again, going over the questions we'll be looking at specifically. So is it simple or complex? Is it pages of charts or modifiers? How crunchy is it? Are there any game-changing mechanics? And i.e., the note we put for ourselves is like dice bags, patrol phases, something that's really unique, that's not done in other rules. Do the rules break down anywhere or don't make sense? And how does the game get its friction? How does the game account for friction in combat? Is it random? Is it player generated? Or is kind of I go, you go kind of stuff? So simple or complex? I think it's kind of in the middle. And I think we've kind of already hit on that a good bit. There are special rules for unit types to really give them flavor, and special rules for weapons to really give them flavor. You don't have to play with any of those if you don't want to. So you really get the feel of the period that you're playing and mass combat without feeling overwhelmed with too much stuff. I feel like there's nothing wrong with games that have a whole lot of complexity to them. I think, though, you typically find players only play that. If a game's going to be really complex, you kind of can't afford to play too much else because you just ain't got the brain space for it. So I feel like Hail Caesar is a real good middle ground for it. Pages of charts or modifiers, again, it's kind of in the middle ground. You have 2 full pages of charts, like 1 full page for range combat, 1 full page for melee. They're very similar charts. They just break down some of the differences. And then that's really all the charts you need for playing the game. Those charts do have a number of modifiers. I think it's a 2d6 roll, right, Kentuckian, for most things. Yeah. So there's some modifiers you add to that. But again, it doesn't crush you with it. So the rules aren't really that crunchy. They have complexity, but they're not crunchy. Yeah. The big one go ahead.
It's like 1d6 modifiers on most things, like when you're attacking, when you're shooting. So when you're talking about 6 modifiers, I think these are the things that the systems, some people hate it, but it's like, hey, firing at formed infantry to the front is a -1. They're using their shields, so it's gonna be harder to hit them. Like, it's pretty easy to see. It's flavorful. It's historical. But man, we've got this down to like 6 modifiers is all you need. 6, 7, dozen modifiers. Like, not a lot. Good. That's great. That helps to add to the play. I'm still getting the flavor of the Norman, shield wall going against some crossbows, or a hoplite phalanx, hoplites going against Persians, but it gives you that feel.
And just to clarify for those who might not be as familiar with mass battle rules, when I say complexity, or we say complexity, a complex example would be, okay, I'm going to have a chart for my short bows, my recurve bows, my long bows, my heavy bows at all these ranges, and here's a full chart just for that. Whereas very, very simple might be bows. It's either bows or it's not bows. Hail Caesar, it'll be, all right, you have bows and maybe long bows and crossbows. And then, it has crossbows? Well, crossbows have a special rule. At this range, they do this. And you can't do crossing or closing fire. Okay, so there's my flavor, or I can just use basic stats. It's a crossbow. So I think it's kind of in that middle ground. They give you the difference without crushing you in it. Game-changing mechanics. For me, it is and what I think made me fall in love with Hail Caesar is the command rolls. I know it is the main point of contention for a lot of people. I do not like I go, you go when it's full army. I do my whole thing, and you wait and see what survives, and then you do your full thing. That is not fun for me. That might be fun for some people. That is not fun for me. So the command roll to me, and just to clarify what that is your leader will have a command rating. You need to roll 2d6 underneath that. How well you roll depends how many actions essentially you get. But on top of that, you have to give a very clear order either to the whole division or a specific unit. So I want them to advance to this point of the table. I want them to advance as far forward until they engage the enemy. I want them to move here and stop and turn and then move here. If you roll really well, you get up to 3. So they could execute your order with up to 3 actions or 3 moves to the best of their ability. If you fail, they might just stand there and do nothing. Like the messenger never arrived. Or we didn't understand what he did. Or the commander says, you know what, I'm not doing that. I think that's dumb. However you want to flavor it. You can also blunder where you fail so bad that they misunderstood your orders. You said advance forward, in line with the unit to your right, and they got charge all the way ahead until you meet the enemy. And so they're going to go, 3 moves forward instead of the 1.5-ish you wanted. Or they're going to go off to the side and charge into somebody else you didn't mean them to. I like that because it's still I go, you go, my whole army, your whole army does something, and then shooting a melee. So I think it really breaks that up so it doesn't feel like I'm just waiting to see what survives. And especially in combat, melee combat is lethal to either side. There are other mass combat rules where when you're being attacked, all you're doing is defending. You can essentially, sometimes you can choose where I'm only going to roll dice to block and not hit back, or maybe I'll sacrifice some to hit back. But essentially, whatever survives your attack, when it's my turn, can attack back. And that doesn't feel historical at all and doesn't feel fun at all. So for me, like the main mechanic that really is game changing is the command phase. or the command rules. Where rules do kind of break down or don't make sense, we've mentioned a little bit, is some of the ambiguity. There's some ambiguity in like proximity, and we've talked a little bit before, Kentucky and I, about unit frontage and units in support. If you have some smaller units, two units lined up against the front of another one larger unit, kind of who's the primary fighter? How does that support work? Are they both fighting independently, or is one the main and the one supporting? That stuff is a little unclear, but because it's a friendly set of rules and it's not like a tournament set, you just kind of work out with your opponent what makes sense, and you all feel, and you kind of get over it. And so that command rule, I think, is also where you get the friction, because you don't know. There's the friction. You don't know if they're going to hear your orders. You're a dude on a horse or standing there yelling or sounding trumpets or flags or sending runners to give orders, and they may not get there in the time you want. I will say the only thing I would probably change, I think would make people less annoyed with the command role, is when a commander fails his role, he can't do anything else, essentially. And I think you could modify it, or maybe if they had changed it where it's like, okay.
I've seen people do this, and I think the base commander, this is a great point that you're making. And so I've seen people that address this, that they loved everything else about the rule set, but then they hated this, which seems to be the lightning rod of this rule set. Like the command, my guy's sitting there doing nothing. An average commander in the game is an 8. So you will go lower than an 8 with 2 dice a majority of the time. Now, getting a 9, 10, 11, 12, that's 4. That's a third of the percent chance, 1/3 that you're not going to be able to do that. So that should theoretically get you at least 1/3 of the time. Great commanders in the game, whether you increase them or they're Pyrrhus or Alexander or something, are normally in like the Hannibal. They say that, hey, you can purchase Hannibal. I've seen people just increase their commander, and so that means division commanders and everything. So now if you say, that 9, if you just made them a 9, then, hey, you would fail like 25% of the time. And so it would be less stingy, those things. I think my fix to that, to those who are, maybe they liked it, everything but that, is I would just increase it to the 9s, and like maybe your amazing commander is a 10, which I think would be, hey, there is a slim chance he would fail on 11 or a blunder. But I've seen people do that rather than like, the rule set says it calls for the reroll, but I think increasing it if you are just that offended by it. But dang, I love the tension. I don't know how many times Hurst have been looking at each other in the face, and we're like, oh, dude, I've gotten you. You're within 1 move. I'm going to charge this division. And I think there is some of that. I go back to people that crap on this, and they're like, it's not historically accurate. And it's like, no, there have been so many times written about where if that Centurion, the Primus Pilus, doesn't take over and charge or like convert that wing, like everything is going to fall back. Cynocephaly, the battle I mentioned a few times, Philip's phalanx is getting ready to form up on the other side of the hill, and they know the Romans are coming, they're going to get, but then the Romans catch them totally off guard and just massacre when the Macedonians are really winning this battle up until that point. So, there's just too many times in history where you can point to, like, yeah, unfortunately getting caught with your pants down is part of ancient combat, and I feel like the command role really, I think you nailed it.
Yeah, I don't think it should go away, but I think there are easy ways to make it more digestible for some people, like yours, just rolling it. You could have it where, if you're given a command to a single unit and you fail, you do whatever, or you don't roll as well. That's what happens to that unit, but maybe the commander can keep issuing orders to the rest of his units, unless he gave a whole division, or if he did a whole division order and failed it, well, that was the risk of a whole division order. There are very easy ways, I think, to modify tiny modifications to the command role, where you still keep it and it still gives you the desired effect for the game. But maybe if it's such a hard pill to swallow, you can't.
Yeah. No, I totally agree. But even with us giving, I think you would agree with me on this point, even with us giving you those recommendations, me and Wyndehurst like playing it rules as written.
Yeah.
We think it is fantastic rules as written, even though there are some people that are, oh man, you mean I can't tell this very uneducated hoplite unit what to do, and they're just going to not snap their fingers and teleport over here. No, that's not how that works.
Yeah.
Keep going. If you have anything else, or do
No,
you want
yeah,
my
that was
thoughts
the
on
last mine. If you want to go ahead and share with us your thoughts.
simple or complex? I would definitely say it errs on the side of simple. I know you said it's kind of in the middle. I still think it would fall towards the simple. Like if 50-50 is right in the middle, I would still see it maybe over to simple by like, it's simple by 60-40, 70-30. I think it's pushing the simple. Pages or charts. The 16 pages, I think, really help out. I think there are not a lot of modifiers that always tries to make the rule sets very playable. And so the 1 to 7 modifiers, hey, are you winning in combat? +1? Are you charging? You have the impetus? That's real easy. And I want to say here, because we didn't talk about it too much in the army list of the rule set, but your unit type, will have, it looks like it's 7 with their points cost. So it's their clash, it's their sustained combat, their short range, their long range, their morale, their stamina, and then their special, like if they have any rules. So you're talking like only, 6-7 things you need to know about that unit. Well, and then the clash, like clash impotence in ancient combat is so much like that charge in. Hey, what is their clash? Cavalry, it might be a 6 clash and a 3 sustained. Gallic warband's a 9 clash but a 6 sustained. If they're in combat for longer than one, I think that is so nuanced, but man, that really just adds to how that rules mechanic of initial charge and everything goes in there. Your short and long range, most units aren't going to have long range. That short range shows you how units, even though they may not be on the front line, but they're able to get those 3 dice, 2 dice in support roll. Like they're still able to push that, and that is, I think is very, exhibitive of ancient combat, where you have that back rank pushing forward, throwing spears overhead to help edge out the fight. And I really just love how that's done. The 4 kind of, every army list will have the 4 kind of guides of how they're produced. So I think that adds to the rules mechanics and nuances a little bit, in the sense of you have to take this. I guess it probably should have been, we might want to talk that in the rules mechanics, but I'm bringing it up right now because I think those mechanics and those nuances add to how that army actually played. Like the Parthians I'm looking at, cavalry has to be 75% of the army. Very historically flavored, right? Very historically flavored. Your infantry have to be whatever. The Spartan, if you're going to take a hoplite army, man, your phalanx is going to be a decent majority of it. And then every army, we've seen the one in the Republic Roman army. I know me and you've played that till our eyes bleed, where your Hastati and your Princeps are kind of the same, but then your Hastati don't count against you, which mimics that you're going to fight it. So there's these very quick things that they do in the gaming mechanics that I think just add to the historical flavor. Game-changing mechanics. I agree with you in the command phase. I absolutely love the command phase. And then I want to jump up and down on the proximity rule. I love the proximity rule. It's the same people that I think hate the command mechanic. And just to be clear, I know you talked the command mechanic, but you have to do the command per division. So you'll go 1 division, you'll go, your left flank division, your center division, and then your right division. Right, you're going to do all those commands first before you head to the next division. So it gives you a little bit of, maybe you want to do the biggest point first. The rules account for you having a general reroll for the army. So like you can reroll 1 dice, a little bit of argument. I know the new 2nd edition rule set says once per turn. I'm pretty sure, we've only played it once per game, just to make it not that, hey, you have to stay afoot. Again, I think this goes back to, if you want to modify it and it's a friendly game, it doesn't matter. But the command is good, and then proximity allows to, when you're within 12 inches of your opponent, you're not going to show your flank. You're either going to go towards the enemy or go away. That is very indicative of ancient combat, in the fact that you're not going to have units snaking to try to get on the flank of a unit and just be historically inaccurate to my degree. Yeah, there's some special troop types that really, marched in the face in front of the enemy. Very rare. Very rare. And there's still ways to pull that off, I think, being out of command range. The rules, allow you to pre-measure to some degree. So I still think, like, all of those things are great. any rules that break down and don't make sense. I think the book does a good job of outlining how multiple units engaged in aligned combat work. Me and Wyndehurst, based on the nature of it, I think it's always going to have some trouble. And for example, the one that me and Wyndehurst played a dozen times, if not more, where you've got two Republican Roman units going against the warband or Virginian, and so you're kind of rolling those dice separate, and they're rolling their saves, and then they're rolling their attacks back you. I think keeping those dice separate, making sure that you're doing that is pretty easy to understand. I just think it's really easy to mess up if you roll all 10 dice together, if you do something that the rule set doesn't account for. And then that's what I would say has issues with maybe not breaking down totally, but there's some times where you just got to be on your game or on point when you're kind of going through those multiple big combats. And I'm telling you right now, if you're playing a game of Hell Caesar, you're going to get into those 2-on-1 units, 3-on-2, 4-on-3, whatever it is. You're going to have those combats. Friction. I love the the command roles that we've already talked about. I love the range combat. Me and Wyndehurst totally agree on this. We hate the you-go-I-go systems. We love this game. And there is some you-go-I-go to this. Red versus blue, your three phases, your command, your melee, or your command, your range, your melee. But they are so engaged with each other, and you're trying to figure out, like you may have range combat, coming up, you're kind of figuring out, hey, what's going on. So I don't think it's you're sitting there waiting for the other player to just, you definitely engage, you're figuring out, you want to know if he's going to fail his command roll. You're trying to see, based on the movements, what's going on there. The last thing I'll add to this kind of section is rules, mechanics, and nuances. The historical personalities in this 3,500 years that we're talking about are larger than life. Julius Caesar, Hannibal Barca, Tarquin the Proud, any of the successor generals, Antigonus, Henry V, we're going into the 100 Years' War, whatever you want, they are larger than life. I love, one thing that you saw in WAB is you can have these crazy characters and they can definitely change the whole game and the premise of it. I love adding a general to a combat to fix that wing. When I attach Alexander to the companions and he charges into the middle, or I attach Julius Caesar or Hannibal, I'm like, hey man, I feel like Canine. I'm going to attach Hannibal against Wyndehurst and he's playing the Romans. Like, I need the additional 3 attacks, right? Alexander gets 6, right? It's done in such a good way. Most units on your attacks are looking at like 5, 6, 9 if you've got a pretty big impetus unit. And you're adding 3 attacks for most generals is like just enough to where, wow, that's going to possibly make a difference. But then you're leaving them out here to get killed. There's some risk involved. I think it captures it so well in a sense of that larger than life character is now on the tabletop. Pyrrhus of Epirus, Harold, or William the Conqueror. Like when you're Normans, like, hey, he's in that cavalry charge, or he's doing that, or you can have that general or that division commander. And when I think about, yes, you can do it in L'Art de Guerre where they get extra pips in the command phase, or you can, in DBA, I don't really think there's anything to them. WAB, it's too much, right? In Warhammer Ancient Battles, they're too powerful. And there's a lot of people, I think it does the general stuff real well, but it gives an ode to the periods that you're playing, where these, Shakespearean generals are just larger than life demigod type figures. You feel that on the tabletop, but they don't break it. And it's high risk, high reward. You're going to get killed, you're going to get wounds, and you're going to get taken out and be a valiant, posthumous general on the battlefield. Those are the only things I'll kind of add to it. I think you hit everything else on the head as far as rules, mechanics, and nuances. I have to be candid. In the decade that I think I've been playing it, I know you've been playing it close to that when me and you even started playing it, 6 years ago, and I know you played it even when you were your first time in England. So the decade plus that we've been playing it, the one thing that I can't say, I've read through them several times, is I haven't played a siege yet. and that was Hail Caesar 2 added the siege rules, added fighting on the walls, siege engines, and all those things. I am very looking. I bought a whole Roman wall and everything I wanted to do. Dyrrachium and some kind of sieges on walls and everything. I am very interested to watch that. Elysia with all my Gauls and Anthony fighting off, some Gauls there. I'm very interested to do that. I think reading through the siege rules several times, I think those are going to be exactly what I'm looking for. They're nuanced siege, but they're not game changing, and you're going to feel played to Hill Caesar. Have to be candid with the audience. That's not something I've ever played. I know Wyndehurst has some Greek walls that may be a Syracuse siege soon, so we'll see. But no, that's all I have on it. You have anything else, or do you want to score it?
There was one other, with the I go, you go that I think is really well done. You do see this in some other rules. I don't know if I've seen it in any other mass combat rules, but combat is simultaneous. When you charge my unit, we both roll attacks, and then we both roll our saves, and then whoever's got the most or whoever takes the most casualty loses. So I really feel like it keeps you engaged the whole game through. Like you said, in the command phase, you're looking to see how the battle lines are changing. If they fail to advance, you might have an opportunity that you just wouldn't have had a second ago, and now you need to be thinking about that. And with the proximity rules, it also helps mitigate some of that concern with my units not being able to do things because there are initiative moves. So if you're within X range of an enemy unit, your unit commander can take the initiative to act a limited way. And so I really think they do a great job in balancing it all out. So for scoring, I gave it another 9. I think it does a really good job in the mechanics. There's never been a mechanic that while we were playing and all the times we've been playing, I was like, that just doesn't make sense, or man, that just doesn't feel right, or I just don't understand how we apply this. It's never happened. And I play so many rules. I'm a bit of a rule book hoarder, a collector. I love buying rule books and playing different games. And I can't say that about very many of them. So I think a 9 for me. What about you?
I'm going to give this a 9.5, and it's just, I think I totally concur with everything you said, and I agree with you wholeheartedly. I think the thing that still keeps this saga and some of the skirmish games we play are the other ancient war games where the commanders are too powerful or they're nothing, they don't even matter, and it's like, dude, this is, Polybius didn't write about this guy because he was, didn't matter. It does it so perfectly for me, and I would just say the commander input and some of the historical flavor on the things you mentioned about like 1 to 5 modifiers, 1 to a half dozen modifiers and stuff, but then it's like, hey, I got 7 characteristics on my unit, and the pilum, okay, the pilum being this, tempered steel weapon you're throwing into a shield, does it disarm the shield? Can it get? I don't even want to argue. I know there's historical people that are going to say different things about that, and it's a lightning rod, but like to give you that 1+, but to give you that historical flavor is just, man, that's so cool how it captures it in the mechanics without writing a 500-word paragraph about how to incorporate the pilum versus a million different armor sets. I'm going to give it 9.5, and I think generals is probably one of the reasons with everything else that I get it, because I think it captures those people specifically. And if you don't want to be Alexander the Great riding your minions down into the middle of the, like to get a feel of that to where it's not too overpowered, but man, you feel like he's going to smash this division, but man, he's out there in the open, or Caesar holding up the, the flank, or, any Vercingetorix, Hannibal at Cannae. It's just, you get that feel. It pushes me. I'm going to give it a 9.5. But we'll move on because we're crunching on time and we're now over the hump. And we're going to go to opponents. I think this one will be quick. Opponents. If I pick up this game, again, we're moving on to, you gave it just to recap, rules. You gave it a 9, I gave it a 9.5. Boom. Now we're on to opponents. Player community, right? If I pick up this game, will I find a local opponent? Are there conventions that support the game near me? Are there local clubs that support the system? Do people house rule the system? If so, is it the same game with those rules? Opponents. I think you can make them. I think most people that wargame historical will, one, because I think go back to the internet about how often do men think about the Roman Empire. I think a lot of men who aren't even interested in historical wargaming think about the Roman Empire. And I think most people that I've gotten into Hail Caesar have gamed it from the Roman Empire perspective. It is very not daunting to get players to paint a bunch of scale Lorica Segmenta and red tunics, and everybody loves. We've talked about the opening scene to Gladiator so many times. Like, everybody loves that, I think, and especially if you're a historical wargamer. And guess what? I have a trash army of Gauls. I'm willing to face anybody day and night. I think you're going to have a hard time finding an opponent. And I'm talking about in the United States. I think you can build them, but I think it's not on everybody's, with costs, with 3D printing, with, I would say, me and Wyndehurst have similar paths, I know, on how we got into wargaming. So whether you got in, with Space Marines and then discovered historical, and I got into Airfix. And so ancient, movies, all of those things, big part of my life. I don't think that's the case anymore for people that are coming in, but I'm very happy that everybody normally to pass their elementary school and, high school has to take some type of world civilization survey classes, and they'll normally learn to some degree ancient history and have some marking of it. I just don't think it's if you can tap into that, you'll be able to build a local opponent, but I think it's rare that you'll find one. It just depends on where you are. And I'm talking here in the States. I think Europe is more prone to probably have, and other worlds throughout the globe are more prone. But, American history going only 250 years plus back for what we consider American history, regardless of some of the other things that's just not documented well. I think that, ancient battlefields and stuff are so far from us that I think you're going to be pressed there. Are there conventions that support the game near me? I will say, as being in the southeast of the United States for most of my adult life, every time I go to a convention, I normally see a Hail Caesar game being put on, or at least some type of version of Hail Caesar. I'll say that. Are there local clubs that support the system? Let's say of the half dozen clubs that I've been in the last 7 years, I think most of those clubs, we played a game of Hail Caesar. I think it was, I think it was part of the system. Out of the half dozen people that were in each of those clubs, I want to say at one of the last ones I was at, the Clarksville Historical Wargamers, probably about 3 or 4 people ended up purchasing Hail Caesar armies. And I'd say half of those got them painted in time, but that's where I'm at. Do people house rule the system? If so, is the game the same with those rules? I would say yes. When I've talked to people that have played it, there's always been house rules. I myself to that, so no issue. I think if you're looking to build a community, are you podcast, or maybe you're an ancient wargamer and you just don't, nobody's going to play Lard to Gur with you, even though it's more popular, maybe, I don't know. I would say it's not going to take much effort to get 2 small armies up to snuff and to get people into this game and to give it a shot. And I think it would be awesome if you could do that, because I think once you dive into this rule set, you're going to have a good time. I'll say I'm probably pessimistic in this section. I'll kick it to you, Wyndehurst.
Yeah, so this section is always hard for us in America because we are so dispersed compared to our brothers and sisters in wargaming across the world. So when we look at this from the perspective in the U.S., I feel like every set of rules we review it's very similar. You're going to have a hard time finding somebody locally who already plays this rules specifically. In the UK, in the 6 years I spent in the UK on two sides of the island, it really depended on each club. Because there is a larger time and monetary investment in big armies, players tend to pick a set of rules, and a lot of the wargame community is older, and so or was they're coming up with older players who were playing rules before Hail Caesar, so their armies were designed for a specific set of rules, and so that is all they are willing to play in mass battles. My first base, the local club, Hail Caesar was the go-to for mass ancient battles. At my second base, the local clubs, it was not. So, that's just hit and miss. I also have always seen it at a convention. Usually at least one table is running, some, like Kentuckian said, some version of Hail Caesar. There aren't really a lot of clubs, so to speak, in the U.S. like there are in Europe. But I do feel like most brick and mortar stores that also carry some historicals probably have Hail Caesar because it's put out by Warlord, and Warlord is is probably the biggest, historical wargaming company that's out there. So it's a lot easier for a company that initially started stocking Bolt Action to pick up some of Warlord's other games. And then you've got huge companies out there putting out great plastics as well, with Victrix, Wargames Atlantic, and other that also stock other things. I think you will find company or brick and mortar stores that carry the historical models that you need to start your armies. My Hail Caesar armies started as Saga skirmish forces. And I feel like the best way to grow new players or to get historical wargamers into Hail Caesar is kind of that avenue. Because they're going to be like, oh man, well, I did this for Saga and I really like it. But what inevitably happens, especially with games like Saga, is, it's designed for 6 points. And then they start pushing that. Well, what if we did 8 points? What if we did 10 points? And really, they just, we like to paint, we like to make models, paint our armies to grow it out. And inevitably, we want to get everything on the table. So I don't think it's very difficult to take people who already play historical war games, anywhere from the huge span of history that these rules cover, maybe at the skirmish level, and encourage them and motivate them to add to those armies, because you don't really need that much more from one skirmish force to get to, a reasonable starting point for Hail Caesar. I don't think that's a very big leap. Or you could just do what Kentucky and I do, and we just make both armies, because if I'm going to have Normans, I want to have Saxons. If I'm going to do my Syracusan Greeks, I'm going to end up doing Republican Romans or, any of the other, factions that they fought. And so I think if you have both sides already, it'll be very easy to find opponents, because these rules cover such great points in history that it's, for me to put on a game of Hastings, any historical wargamer or anybody interested in military history is going to be familiar with Hastings. And I can be like, hey, you want to do Hastings? They're going to already be familiar with it. I can put on a game, and I promise they'll be hooked. Do people house rule it? And if so, it's the same game. I said yes and yes. We talked about simple house rules that you could add that we don't, but you could, just to change some of the base mechanics. And I don't think it would change the game. Do people house rule it beyond that? Probably, but that's how we have so many different versions of. That's why we have Bell Ludi. He took Hail Caesar and made it accessible to brand new wargamers. There is no copying in historical wargaming. Like, everyone's done everything, so there's going to be similarities between a lot of them.
This podcast is going to be evidence, Peter, in your lawsuit that Warlord does against you when they become GW. No, I'm kidding.
So yeah, I think my score reflects it. So would you score it?
I think it's just because of the effort I put into getting players. And And so again, I'm just going off the states. Richie Hall, some of you guys that post on the Hell Caesar forums on Facebook, you guys are awesome, and you guys are motivating the crap out of me. Some of the local players I've tried to get to are Charlotte and stuff like that, and we'll talk a little bit that more on. I'm gonna put a 6, and I know it's low, but it's just because I think it requires effort. But I will say it's definitely worth it. I've put it in at every club I've played at in the last
pause for a second.
7+.
Sorry, the recording stopped. There we go. Okay, we're good.
I put in the effort in the last 7 years at every club I've been, and I've gotten people to play with me, and they've really enjoyed themselves. They've built armies after they've played a handful of games with me, and I think it's worth the effort. I just think, I got to be honest with the audience. It's a little bit of an uphill climb, but man, it is worth it. It's worth every rung in that ladder. But I'm going to give it a 6 in kind of community.
So my score reflects that I had some time overseas. I had 6 years in Europe with access. And considering here in the States, anybody I've been able to bring to the wargaming table has been more than willing to play this. I feel like in the US, you tend to find fewer people who are like, I'm just not going to play that. I only play this or that Ancients. Because we're so dispersed, people are, I feel like, generally more willing to just roll dice. All right, this is what you want to play. I just want to get a game in. Yeah, let's give it a try. And I think they'll like it. So my score is an 8 because I have had a better... it's been easier for me to find opponents in the time since it come out than perhaps you have. So if you don't have any other thoughts on opponents and players, we'll move on to number 7.
Send it.
Support from the publisher specifically. So we do 2 supports. We do support from the publisher, creator, and the company. And then after this, Kentuckian will talk to us about support from third parties. So from the publisher, creator, and company, we're specifically talking about Warlord. Do they provide updates and errata regularly if it's needed? Do they make supplements? Do they keep the game fresh, or are the changes normally good? Or is it too much change, which we've seen in other rule sets? Do they provide the updates regularly? The errata last came out, or was last updated in 2023. That's not too long ago. I don't think, because they aren't also coming out with constant updates, I don't think there's a need for constant errata updates. It came out very, almost immediately after 2nd edition did, and then that's really all they need. Supplements, we've talked about, they have the army list supplements. They're actively working on kind of campaign theater supplements. So Hail Caesar, I think Epic is evident of how focused and alive Hail Caesar is in Warlord's mindset to keep it alive in the sense that, hey, they want to reach out to a different scale, and it's pretty much very similar rules. The fact that they're still paying money to hire outside people to help develop supplements tells me that it is very much alive and in the minds of Warlord, that they haven't forgotten about it. Like we have seen with other rules from Warlord and other companies, where it's like the company's still alive, they're still pushing rules out, but maybe they've forgotten about this older set. I do think the supplements keep the game fresh because they add stuff for people interested in those periods. I would love to see, a supplement that just focuses entirely on kind of like, the beginning of the Vikings to, the Norman conquest and Norman occupation. I think, because that's what I have armies for. That might be something they come out with in the future. Who knows? They've got...
Well, they have Shield Wall, right? Shield Wall is that exact thing.
Is it a whole supplement? I haven't looked at it in a little bit. Is it a whole campaign supplement, or is it more of an army list?
More of an army list,
kind of
but
a mix.
I think it has some... Yeah, I think it has some variation to it. So I think to your point, they do it to some degree. I'll say that.
Yeah. You know what? Last I was looking at Shield, I do think they had some of the big battles like Hastings. But, maybe it covers too big of a breadth of history. Like some of the other supplements are very specific campaigns. I don't think they're updating it too much like we see in other rules. The supplements don't change the base game. Like we said, the first edition came out in 2011, and then like around 2023, the second edition came out. So obviously they're not overdoing it with updates and changes, and I don't feel like it's in need of updates and changes. Maybe a reprint just so they could fix the charts in the back that are covered in the errata would be convenient. But yeah, I don't have a whole lot to say on this topic. I think Warlord is still supporting it as sufficiently. Their inventory is usually fully stocked for all their ancient stuff, Hail Caesar, models that they cover, they put in there. So yeah, Kentuckian, you have thoughts?
Love that the supplements are still getting attention. You have to mention Epic in this point, just because it's the company is kind of competing with itself, right? And so Epic was, again, to get mass battles to the table for people who don't like that much lift on their wallet or don't have that much table space. And so like a 6x4 Epic Hail Caesar, is a massive battle where it's pretty tight. When me and you have played Hail Caesar, we've normally either tried to extend it to my full 8-foot table, or we've tried to, be a little nuanced on how we approach it to get 350 points on. It's normally not, it's pretty tight on a 6x4. And a lot of painting, a lot more detail. So there's some significant kind of concern with that. So I think Epic has taken some of the wind. You just have to be honest, from the sales of 28 mil Hail Caesar is what we'll call this. But I do like this. The supplements seem to be pretty standard. And, what we just saw with Conquest in the East with the Mithratic Wars and Pontus, super cool. Really looking forward to the Caesar stuff. I picked up Once and Future King, which is the... I don't even have an army painted for it right now, but it's the Romano British and, Hail Caesar and King Arthur, Dark Age Saga Volume 2. And it's, great unit types, some generals, some specific characters, everything that you're used to, a little bit more flavorful, creating the army, and then scenarios in the back here, and then campaigns, which I'm seeing a lot in, campaign in the back of this one, campaign in the back of the Pontus Wars, which, man, I really enjoy. I bought an old DBA campaign system, and that was something that I thought was missing for the longest time. I think that one of the first Caesar books had where you could play Age of Caesar, which came out before the Gallic Wars and all of that. I believe this is the one where you could play the battles in order. I know you can do that in the Gallic War and give you a little bit of kind of a feel for, hey, you could have linked games, I guess, even though they're pretty spread out. That one goes all the way through the Civil War to some degree. So I really like how they're doing that, and I think it's at a healthy enough pace based on, what we talked about with the community and how most ancient gamers are kind of aligned in their rules. But the other support I'll say that they run is they have decent army deals, and they definitely, like most companies, I think they've modified like most of the starter armies. Yeah, you probably won't be able to get a 350-point army out of them, but I'd have to say they support it by the starter armies being close to what you'd need to play a small game of Hail Caesar. So that's another way, just on them being a miniatures manufacturer, that they can get you an easy access. 100 models, 100 plus models, weapon and everything, $150 is pretty cheap. And that gives you a decent size, army. You're not at the 350 points like me and Wyndehurst said. And I think based on theirs, if you were going to do 10 Caesarian units, you're still 60 guys off. But that's pretty close. And, that's a smaller game, and you're good. No big changes. I really think the errata, just like I said earlier, I think that came by a editing issue where they had screwed it up. I don't really think anything major out of there. And then I guess I will add this part in here. The rule book, I've noticed where I looked at the old rule book, version 1 has the, kind of AD Legionnaire Centurion on it. And when you look at it, it's got what the ranks are: infantry, their size, and everything else like that. And it says heavy chariots, 2 to 3 models, light chariots 4 to 5 models. And I wanted to bring this up right now because I think this was an attempt to make it more playable. If you go to one of the earlier pages in the main rulebook and you go to page 67, you'll see that heavy chariots are 2 chariots and light chariots are 3. And so I think they've done that in an attempt to kind of reduce some of the bigger model counts and make it more playable, especially for the biblical stuff. And I see their armies, the purchase armies for the Bronze Age stuff, kind of give an ode to that. So I think there's ways that Hail Caesar have tried to. I don't think Hail Caesar 2 is, some people have just called it a reskin. Like, hey, it's basically same. There's a lot of truth to that because it was a good rule set from 2011. But I do think there's some nuanced stuff that they've done. There's some clarity, obviously, in it. And I think that just goes to the support that they're trying to say, 28s is pretty solid set. We want to make a good system. But the only thing I would say is Epic, by its very nature, is going to compete with it. And I hope Warlord continues to do what they're doing right now and support both with healthy sets. The Pontus set, the Once a King, like obviously that wasn't made for Epic. Like there's no Epic Pontus army as of right now. And so that gives their ode to, hey, we're keeping this straightforward. They did the War of the Roses stuff. Like they've kept this, in line and the amount. So I'm pretty happy with it. What do you score the support from the publisher creator?
Yeah, so I score it pretty high. I don't think Epic detracts because I'm looking at Hail Caesar as a whole instead of Hail Caesar just 28. If we're saying Hail Caesar 28 millimeter, then yes, Epic could be competition. But I think Hail Caesar as a rule set that will exist and is being supported, I scored it a 9 because I think they are very active in supporting it. And maybe I am being Candyman, but compared to some of the rules we've been reviewing recently, it is very up there compared to some of them. What about you?
I'm going to give it an 8.5, and because it's my thought, I agree with you. I mean, it's all umbrella, but I think by its very nature, competing with it because it's taking somebody, to have an ancient model or to have an ancient army, you find ancients interesting, and a lot of us are psychopaths, and we have multiple scale armies, right? I have a World War II 15 all armies in 15, all armies in 28, all armies in. I've got 6 millimeter Republican Romans over 28 Republican. So I get that we're kind of dual use, but I think for your average bear, and if money moves all things, it just by its very nature, that's the only reason I give it an 8.5. I think healthy support. You don't need the latest greatest. I'd say once a quarter I feel like I see a Hail Caesar, or at least every other quarter a Hail Caesar push. And it's not, I bought the Camelot Heroes and everything from their Once a King order, but I don't even have those. I just thought they were really, and I thought it'd be some game one day, and I was like, man, I got to pick this up. And they do a great job. Like they have the campaigns in the back. It's a lot of work for, you're talking about $40 and all the nuanced stuff in there. So I support it. I think we're pretty high with 8.5 and 9, and I concur. My only thing is, I just have to say, the person who bought the 6 millimeter Carthaginians or 10, 12 millimeter epics, I don't know if they're going to buy 28 millimeter Carthaginians. But again, does Warlord make Republican Romans or Carthaginians in 28? Not really. So, interesting thoughts. Okay, we'll move on to the next category. Will be support from third parties. 1 to 10 score, again, just like we've gone. Do other companies support the game? Miniatures, terrain, tokens? The short answer is yes. I think most of the token places I've seen will support it. I'm a huge Historique fan with Rob Prince in Louisville. I've got a lot of my markers from him, and he does the generic disorder ones, shake and all of those things. I use his blood chips sometimes just to make those markers that I have from a skirmish ancient game. Miniatures are all over the place. What we talked about, I think it's not really. Ancients are you can really play a lot with ancients to begin with, and you're talking 35, 3,500 years, 4,000 plus years, whatever you want to say, that Hail Caesar really covered in the army list. So you're all over the place. I mean, you can get nitty gritty as you want. If you're like, hey, I want the Mycenaean, you know, Greeks versus these Trojans, or hey, I might just use my hoplite Greeks from third century. I'm not total fan of that, but I see people go in a lot of different directions with that, and I think there's a lot of great manufacturers of miniatures. The STLs, I had Wyndehurst print me up some STLs here because he's been like Johnny on the spot with that stuff, and he's doing amazing work on stuff that models that you couldn't find on the market. I didn't think you could, and then he just pulled them out of thin air. And there's a lot of great companies in the ancient game. Warlord. I think their Phalangites and their Caesarian Romans are some of the best on the market. Vitrix is amazing at what they do. I'm a huge Aventine fan, huge A&A, huge Crusader. Foundry is got a special place in my heart. I don't care how much they increase the price. I'm a Wargames Foundry guy. So there's a lot of great stuff out there. So I think it's pretty, for the miniatures, yeah, it's everything in the world. And everybody's been playing Ancients for a long time. So I'm even trying to think of miniatures that aren't even that more popular anymore, like Relic. And Agema. I don't know. I think Agema got bought by Footsore or something, and I have some Agema elephants and Carthaginians. There's the world is your oyster. Terrain, same. Sarissa does great Roman line. There's a lot of good STLs for forts. Wyndehurst has amazing Blots fort. I'm looking forward to seeing him get done with. I've got some 3D printed STL like Roman mile forts, and I mean, again, I think Terrain is out of control. The miniatures, great. Other companies, I don't know. You can't really say it's specific to Hail Caesar besides the tokens and markers, and those are so generic that I just think the support from third parties is probably off the chain. I don't see anybody. I'm trying to think of like how to couch this in making stuff specifically, everything that you would think is specific for it, like when we talk to other systems like the bolt action pin markers, the chain of command dice, a little tray that you have, or some nuanced stuff you need for like Dead Man's Hand or Napoleonics or anything else like that. Like, it's just so generic. What are we talking about here? Base trays and those things. I really had a hard time kind of nailing this question down, and I think that probably goes to the simplicity of the system. So I think it's very high marks for me, but I think it's the same for kind of every rank and flank ancient to medieval combat game out there. Like the same companies, the same markers you're using in almost every game, the same base trays you're using, the same terrain, the same models. So the world is your oyster on that. I don't think, I think this is just a benefit of how Hail Caesar rule set is written, that they've made it easily accessible from all these third parties. What do you think, Wyndehurst?
Yeah, so I could sum it as yes, but indirectly. With the except if we are willing to go out of the 28 millimeter range, I mean, Bacchus makes packs of Hail Caesar armies. Buy this entire Hail Caesar army, and I've got one for Syracuse because, like you said, we're psychopaths and we're going to do multiple scales. But especially in how open the rules are for the basing requirements and everything, literally anything in the category of ancients could be used for Hail Caesar. Bases designed bespoke for other games, you could also use for Hail Caesar. There's this one, I don't remember the rule set specifically, but there's these bases that have like these little edges, and if you rank them up, they all kind of interlock nicely. It's kind of more of a natural edge than a straight. It's for a specific game, but I've always been tempted on getting those and using for my Hail Caesar armies because they look really nice. I mean, it's really that simple. Like Kentuckian said, the tokens are so generic, you can use any. Terrain is minimal mostly, but for any skirmish or anything in the period will work. I don't think you could ask for more third-party support I guess really the only thing you could do is if like other companies were making 28 millimeter, full armies for Hail Caesar, like Bacchus does with their small stuff. And there might be ones that we just haven't seen, but we kind of like Kentucky and I kind of have the companies we like to get our ancient models from. And so there might be some out there that do that we're just not tracking. So yeah, I scored this pretty high.
What do you give it?
I gave it a 10. I don't think you could ask for easier support. I don't think there's more you could ask for support for a game. I mean, it's
that's fair. That's fair. That's fair. I give it a 9. And the only reason I give it, I agree with you on Bacchus. I didn't really have it because again, I tried to
think 28.
This review, I'm thinking 28, but I just think it's so plug and play. I just think that's a benefit of the rule set itself, so it shouldn't be counted against it. The fact that it didn't have, this went into the play of it and everything. I think the one thing that, is against it is kind of like model count. You're used to skirmish games, but because it's ancients and it's been gamed by, there's hundreds of ancient, everything's out there. Now it's just like you throw a different rule set skin on it. So for this, it's Hail Caesar. Like you have access to all of that arsenal. And whether you use Litco, you print your own bases, however you do it, like it's just, it's out there. And the amount of companies that are producing ancient armies is off the chain. So 9 and a 10, I think that's pretty good from us. I'll kick it to you because I think we're going to have a lot of discussion too on these last. I'd like to hear our home run points on it. Go for the next section. We're down to the last two, team.
Yeah. So number 9 is strongest reasons either for or against playing the game. If we're saying it's over a 5, then we recommend the game. And we'll obviously talk about our reasons for it. So it's a lot of fun is my biggest reason for it, and it's flexible. And I don't know if I've hit that it's flexible hard enough. I mean, either on the third-party support. The reason I gave it a 10 is because the rules are so flexible that you can literally use any scale model and almost any basing mechanic and fit them into Hail Caesar. Warlord's done it itself with Epic. But even if we wanted to focus on just 28s or, the 28 range, say 25 to 32, you can find so much stuff out there. It is so flexible. It is flexible in the sense that the rules cover this breadth of history in a way that feels right at every point in time. Now, granted, we haven't played every point in history, but we've played pretty much all the major blocks. And it feels right each time. It is just such a flexible, and every game is fun. I feel like most wargamers who just enjoy gaming, they're not set on a specific set of rules, and they're not super uber competitive. The games we lose are just as fun as the games we win. And I feel like Hail Caesar, the games in which your units just don't want to listen to you, to me, are just as much fun as the ones that they do exactly what I tell them. So my major thing is it's just a real fun experience that really nails what I look for in ancient mass battle. Like, I'm not on the market. I have a couple other sets of rules just to play with people who really want to play those, but there's several periods where I'm often looking for what's the next skirmish ancient game or medieval game, because I haven't really found the game. Hail Caesar for me is the mass battle game for me. The only reasons that aren't even against it but detract is my frustration with the QRS. And I'm always in every review, I'm a big proponent of a really good, clear, concise, start to finish, quick reference sheet. And Hail Caesar doesn't really have that in its normal form. The 16 pages is really convenient to look through, but it's not efficient. As efficient as I want. Even if they numbered the reference pages, I don't know. If I just had something, I think the normal quick reference you see from first edition is 3 or 4 pages, right? You have your range combat, your melee combat, and then you'll have a breakdown of the turn sequence and stuff like that.
I don't know. It's a decent amount of pages. It's similar to the play sheet. It is
4 pages or something.
No, I think it's more than that. It's like 10. It's still in that. I want to say it's double digits. I
Yeah,
got it right here.
yeah, and that to me is
Uh,
like the most frustrating thing because
it's 178. It's Appendix 4 in the first rule set. It's 178 to 185. So,
yeah,
yeah, I mean,
it's not a quick
seven,
reference sheet,
8. Yeah.
and you know, having not played a whole lot of other mass combat games, I can't fairly compare that to others. You know, a lot of the games we reviewed have been skirmish level games, and it's a lot easier to do a two-sided or even two four sides for quick reference sheet. It might be maybe I'm asking too much of a mass combat game, but to me that's the my biggest frustration in the rules. What about you, Kentuckian?
Um, I This is twofold. I think 9 and 10, I'm going to try to keep them apart because I agree with you. I think kind of what the it factor, our next category that we're going to talk about is the it factor. And so 9, I kind of had almost in both. And we wanted to use these categories to really weight the rest of the scores. It'll help you if you go through our scores and as we talk them through here, like it'll help you understand why we pick and choose it. And we try to show our bias when we have them. We know everybody has bias, but we try to expound on that and see what we're thinking. For me, I concur completely with you. I wrote historical fun. I should kind of scratch that out. I should just put fun here, the strongest reason for playing it, because I think you're going to get that fun out of it. And what does that mean? I think who's coming I consider myself a lover of antiquity. And I think me and you, that's like, I'm going to try to expose our bias because I think our strongest reason is the same. Me and you play from biblical to medieval. Like, we have those armies in our collection, we play those periods, we enjoy that breadth of just history. And whether it's the people, the armies, the history involved in all of those things, we love it. And I think most ancient war gamers kind of are the same, but there are some where nuanced rule sets, like they like playing, I love this rule set for medieval period and this. And for me and you to have one rule set streamlined across 4,000 years of combat it can make it fun. And you're not going, I think me and you both have like all the editions of WAB, Warhammer Battle. I know I've got the WRG. I know I've got some sets. There are just some nuances in between those different books that just take a little bit too much into account. They don't get at, I think, what we're getting at. And for all of that to just say, like, every person I've played Hail Caesar against, even when they load a roll, like normally if it's a new player, I'll try to increase the general level, but they've had a blast. Like they've been like, man, this kind of feels like I'm trying to hold the Roman line here. I'm trying to punch an elephant through the Roman line to get it in, Virginian or I am, or I'm big Gallic war bands. Like this feels like a barbarian, all my inertia, but they still had fun. And so I think it is the strongest reason for playing it. And I just want to at least say our biases on we play so many periods and we play a lot in the ancient medieval realm and biblical realm. Uh, but I just know that there's a lot of people that the kind of reason against that is the real granular people. And I'd read at least, and Wyndehurst knows this, and I think this is going to go to our kit bag. I at least listen to or read half a dozen ancient books a year, or listen to dozens of hours, whether I'm driving to work or something. It's very calming for me, especially while painting, and we're going to get to that later. But I feel pretty well read on a subject. And I agree. There's some granular that I hear people talk about. Well, like, hey, why are the Hastati and the Princeps pointed the same in the rule set? Like, why are they fight? That's not true. That's not how they should have been. And then you look at the little bit of the nuance, and you're like, oh, the Hastati don't count towards the division breaking, so they want you to throw them like trash, and they're going to put them kind of in different mana pools. They're going to be in front. It's still fun. It still gets after the fun. You don't have to be that complex to be fun. And the granular ancient rule sets that I've played, they get bogged down, just like the granular World War II ones that I play. And they get bogged down, and they kind of go against fun. So The reason against that is I think the granular people, or the people that are like, why is my unit doing nothing? Those are going to be your main reason against playing Hail Caesar. But at the end of the day, you're playing a war game, so I have to think fun matters somewhat to you. And you're involved in this social experiment. Whether you're solo playing, it's fun to solo play sometimes, but against that other person to have fun, it's by far. What do you score it?
9.5.
Ooh, okay. I gave it a 10 on this one. And it's just because I just grew up playing Ancients with my old man. Like, Ancients is a huge part of the existence, and it's, even if I don't play it all the time, fun is out there. So we'll switch to our last category, the it factor. Is the game fun and additional caveats not captured in other category? We said the reason for playing it was fun, and so my it factor on Hail Caesar is, how do you have an ancient game that is fun with the historical flavor? How do you pour that historical flavor, cup into this rule set and still make it fun? And so that's my kind of thought on it, is how is it that you can even get that flavor in there? And I think Hail Caesar, the it factor for it is it does it seamlessly and perfectly and with just enough. Like the Pelham rule, the Pike rule, the Generals rule, kind of these larger than life personalities being able to be on the tabletop and being, they're not demigods. They're effective. They're not demigods on the tabletop, but the three, additional kind of clash or hits in combat, 6 if you're Alexander, like that makes sense to me. All of that is, man, just the perfect enough flavor. The Sparabara from the Persians, like that front rank, but you can still fire bows over it. The side chariots, everything that Rick Priestley has done with that, to just say, here's enough flavor, and he chides you in the rules. He says, like, hey, make it what you want. Like, that to me, the historical flavor is what I'll say is the it factor to make it just the perfect rule set for 4,000 years of combat. What's your it factor?
Yeah, so for me, it was the command roles and the combat mechanics combined, because my biggest issue in other mass ancient battle rules has always been the feeling of the I go, you go, and it always feeling like you're going to do all your stuff, and then what I've got left, I'll do my stuff, and then what you've got left after that, you do your stuff. And I don't feel that way in Hail Caesar. Even if it is at heart a I go, you go, the command phase allows enough of that tension that you're not just going to run rampant. I mean, you might get lucky, but that's what it is. It's luck, and you're at the fate of the dice if you're going to be able to pull that off or not. And then with the combat mechanics, how it includes both players so thoroughly, and that you might come at me and you might get all your moves out, but you broke against my shields. I rolled better. My men fought more valiantly. And so I still feel like even when it's not my turn, I'm very much in the game. And it's not weighted too much one side or the other. I mean, like we've talked about with the clash and sustain, like you can feel like these cavalry are going to hit hard, but if they don't break the enemy, they're very vulnerable. They don't want to be stuck in a fight with infantry and stuff. And so I don't know, the command rolls with the, and I've looked at other games how to add something kind of like this command roll, because I like the idea of orders have to get from the commander to the unit, and there's no guarantee that they'll get there when you want, or they'll be clearly understood. And I think Hail Caesar really does a good job of capturing that feeling simply, without actually having to have runners, have models that actually have to travel all the way and get to the other commanders to relay orders like in some other games, which is still fun, but it takes more time, it's more granular, more crunchy. I think they do a really solid job in making it fun, like you said. And I mean, I co-sign everything you said, how well they balance the historical portion for such a wide breadth. It really just is a solid game.
What do you score it? It
Another.
factor.
This one was another 9.
9. Okay, I'm going to put this in the gonculator. I give it a 9.5, and I'd like to defend myself right now to the people out there who are, it seems like our last two scores were, the highest. We're looking at tens. We're looking at uh, we're looking at 9.5s. Those things. And I want to just say, how can it get a playability of this, or this is an 8, and then how can the game, the reasons for playing it be super high? The synergy. I thought of that comment when I was writing down the synergy. How these things interact to get you to the tabletop. No mechanic in my mind is like perfect. We have some really the patrol phase we always go back to with chain of command, the bolt action dice phase where it's not you go I go and you can play the same game a million times, might never ever come out the same way. Like those are just, I'd say those mechanics are like in the 9 category, 9 somewhere. And how can sometimes we rate this game on, we didn't give it, there were some we gave it really high on, but tens and stuff at the end, and I think it's the synergy. It pulling all of those things together is, just amazing. And so I'm putting our scores in the gonculator before we go over, and that way it'll read out what our scores are here.
I've got mine totaled up already.
Okay, I'm gonna just to briefly go back through. Presentation for me was an 8.5, and you had a what?
Let me scroll back up. Presentation 9.5.
And the goal for the game for me, a 9, right?
And 9 for me as well.
It got fun. Gatekeeping, I had an 8.4, in just the sense of, I thought you needed some models. And it's not that, it had nothing to do with everything else, but I thought that alone, based on whether you think it's a fiscal thing or anything, gave me the 8.4. What did you have as gatekeeping?
9.5.
And then I had playability 9.2.
9 for me.
Rules, I had 9.5. I think it's one of just the way those mechanics, the synergy of all of them. Again, there's some imperfections in there, but man, I think they're really good together.
Yeah, it was another 9
You
for
had
me.
And then community, I had a 6. I really only have to go off the United States. And again, Wyndehurst brings a different perspective, with which Richie Hall, a lot of those guys on the Hail Caesar, forums are just amazing people. I love looking at their games and all of their painting. And they give great tips. This is just a shout out for all the groups. The Hail Caesar groups are the Wargaming Ancients, Ancient and Medieval Wargaming groups on social media and everywhere else. Those guys are just amazing. They've been there are a few, that'll throw rocks at you for how dark you paint your Numidians, but everybody else is all right. And then you had community, you said
8.
it high. I think I apologize. 8. Support from publisher, I had 8.5. I just, the only reason, I think Epic competes with it. That's my only thought.
And I have 9.
What did you have? 9. Support from third parties, I have 9. Again, everything Sun can kind of tie to Hell Caesar. You had
10.
Strongest reasons. Fun. I had 10.
You had 9.5.
And then It Factor with the historical flavor, I had a 9.5. You had
a 9.
That gives me, if I'm doing this right, a 87.6. What do you have?
91.5.
That's right. It doesn't break the 90s for me, and it's one of my favorite rule sets. I'm a little bit of a pessimistic person, but I will say I think bolt action and chain of command were high 80s for us. I was a little bit hard on it in some of the categories. I think I'm real close to you. I see us kind of lockstep. It was interesting that we both came at it from different perspectives, even with our questions to guide us.
Which is good.
But no, I think I totally agree with. I think it's worthy. It's easily an A minus up there in the 90s. I think it's. Me and you know this, and maybe I'm trying to guard against myself. One of the first games me and Wyndehurst played against each other was Hail Caesar. Bolt action and Hail Caesar, and I just love this rule set. It's a must-have. Total must-have for me. One of the greatest rule sets of all time. Love Rick Priestley. Now I can tell everybody I'm a big fanboy at the end of this episode. But yeah, I mean, I will be critical of some things, I guess, and so that came out in the score. Any other thoughts before we move to our next section?
Now, I'm glad when our scores differ, because I think if we had the same mentality in everything, then what's the point of having both of us here?
Yeah.
You zeroed in on thinking of Hail Caesar 28 mils perspective, and I would looked at Hail Caesar the breadth. I had some broader world experience with the UK versus yours purely in the United States, and I think that's what's great about doing these deep dives together is that we can offer more perspective, because because we're not co-located, we're not just two guys sitting in a room together who just game with each other every time and have the same experience. We're trying to show the breadth of the wargaming world, and I think by scoring it so high with that breadth, just really shows what a great game it is. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, if it sneaks 2 more points out of me on the community not being a 6, I mean, like, it's in the 90s. So that's what probably held me back a little bit. But well, I'll kick it over to you. We're at our last sections where I know we always go long in our podcast, but we look forward to these last few sections. I'll kick it over to you for our kit bag.
Yep. So that's the end of reviewing Hail Caesar. So our last 2 sections, we always like to wrap up on kit bag and scouting report. So actually, this kit bag was Kentuckian's suggestion, and I saw it and I was like, absolutely, that's a great one. But Audible, I've used Audible now since probably 2017-ish, and commuting to and from work. We've talked about how great it is to have something to watch when you're painting or listen to a podcast, but videos can be distracting. You have to put something on that's that balance of I want this on, but I need to focus on what I'm painting enough. And podcasts, you can kind of binge through them pretty quick. So especially the shorter format ones. And so, books, I listen to a lot of fiction books as well, or, kind of religious commentary books. And, it's just a great thing to do while I'm painting, and great opportunity to listen to it, as well as travel. Being in the military, driving home, right now I'm 18-hour car drive from home. So if I was going to do that, it'd be several audiobooks on the way there and back. So yeah, I think Audible is a great tool. It'd be nice if they'd sponsor somebody like us, but I recommend it for free. And I think it's great. What about you, Kentuckian? Your thoughts on Audible?
Love it. Got into it, I think similar around the time, somewhere between like 2010, I don't know when it came out, like 2010 to 2015. I feel like I got into it around then, and it was because it really wasn't around like because of the hobby, but it was I used to do long runs, still do long runs about 3 times a week. They've gone down, like I only do 1 5-miler a week, but it's normally like 3-milers now. And used to listen to radio and things like that, and then listen to a book keeps you engaged, kind of makes the run go by easier, I'll say. And as much as I love YouTube, and we've talked about YouTube and some of those things, if it's not podcasts, it's the Kings in General channel, it's History March, it's the Ancient Guy, it's a lot of any of the wargaming channels on YouTube. I love listening to those. But when I'm doing it to hobby, I notice that with the physical, like visual stimulus, I will look up from the table. I want to see this battle. It's very engaging because it is YouTube. And I notice when I listen to Audible, I'm more productive at my painting bench. And so, or if I'm listening to podcasts that I'm not seeing the video for, I'm a little bit more productive. That's not a knock. Hopefully you still watch us on YouTube, right? We'll see. But like, I just find it's easier to kind of get that. And man, it can get your juices flowing, especially if it's a period. I'm just looking at I got a bunch of Mike Cole, Lydell Hart, Adrian Goldsworthy, everything that he does in the ancient kind of categories, sticking to this. Ethan Worthington. I did the subscription. Barry Strauss, Polybius. I have his histories on here. A lot of stuff. Pyrrhus of Epirus by Hourglass. I just downloaded that one. It's been an amazing book. but I did the subscription where you get a credit a month,
Me
and
too.
it's just been so good to kind of just plug into those credits to where you can get a 20-hour book for that one credit or a 10-hour book or even a 2-hour book, right? And so it's been great to kind of jump around and keep that fresh and still digest some of the historical material while I'm going through there. So Audible, totally, I'm glad we talked a little bit about this, and sometimes we always save kit bag for the end, but there's sometimes where we're frantically remembering kit bag as we go into the week of recording an episode. And it's what do we add? We always try to be nuanced and think,
Yeah.
what else is out there using. Again, to the community, to the listeners and viewers, keep giving us your kit bag approaches because I'm always you guys help us along. Like, we would do this podcast if it was me and Wyndehurst talking to each other, but man, Wyndehurst has beat the drum on this. The community is so awesome, and especially for kit bag, we've had a lot of, we use the really useful boxes because of Yorkshire. We use some different painting styles because people have messaged us and do this stuff. Love the community. Can't thank you enough. Look forward to, post on the On Patrol Facebook group, like what is in your kit bag. So in order to continue to expedite this episode along, we'll move to the next point, which is the scouting report. And so kind of what's next. I didn't even mention it. I put all my ancient helmets behind me because we're doing Hail Caesar. Scouting report is, I had said stupidly a few weeks ago that I should get done with all my Caesarians by the time September is in. We're recording at the end of September. I got 3 days to go, and I'm under halfway with my Caesarians, and I've got about 100 painted. If you can see them, and really appreciate again another shout out to the community. I'm holding them. If you're listening to this podcast, not watching on YouTube, I'm holding them in front of 4 24-man units. Really enjoyed. I'm looking at this. How I know I like ancients. I have about 100 ospreys across from me, sitting on my shelf. At least 50 plus 60, maybe somewhere in there. That I just love diving into ancients, the ospreys with their images, the battle layouts, all the research that they do into them. But one thing that you can never run afoul of is the community has helped me so much with Caesarian. What color to paint the helmets, what color to paint the shield boss, what color. Just another shout out for the scouting report. So those Caesarians, I hope to be 3/4 of the way done with the army in the next 3 days. And that's me cranking out another 4 units and being 3/4 done with the army. We'll see if that happens. On the painting desk in the wings, Italians are out there. I'm hearing it first. There's another Hail Caesar supplement that's going to be coming out soon that me and Wyndehurst were able to put some input on, and it's going to be Caesar and Pompey and some of the civil wars. And so I'm going to paint another Caesarian army to kind of get some of those fights in. So I really look forward to that. Got my Pyrrhus figures ready to roll. I'd like to get into that, and then I have those Persians I bought almost a year ago that haven't touched the light of day, and I lined up some Foundry phalangites. So I'm sticking in the ancient realm right now, and we'll just see kind of where that goes. I'll be going to Yorktown next Friday for a battlefield staff ride, so that'll be a lot of fun. Maybe they'll get some AWI stuff going. And as far as conventions and what I look forward to, I know the Williamsburg muster is coming up. I'm going to try to attend if I can, and I might try to make it to fall in if I can get leave in. It's been pretty hectic with I'm getting a master's degree while I'm here in Virginia for a year, and there's a lot of obviously studying, reading, hundreds of articles now at this time. It's only a lot of reading if you do it. A professor once told me that, and that is a very true statement. So I'm trying to be diligent, but man, that really can cut into hobby time. And I'm coaching a soccer team. All right, that's on my scouting report. My young daughter's soccer team. We're getting smashed, so we're learning resiliency right now. But yeah, just looking forward to getting these Caesarians done and getting some more push on the ancients, and then I'll see what Wyndehurst shoots me pictures of that makes me get distracted and pick up another project. So we'll see. What's on your scouting report, Wyndehurst, as far as painting bench and any running to go get games in, and what else?
Yeah, I haven't had the opportunity to get a whole lot of games in. I've got some guys locally who want to. I literally like this last week finally got my hobby space all put together because we had a second shipment of stuff coming from storage that had a bit more hobby stuff in it than I was remembering. So finally, like hobby space is done and put together. 3D printers, resin and FDM both up and running, which is really nice. You might have seen the pictures on Facebook of the giant trireme, and I just also finished a brireme, and finally found a Viking longship model that I liked that printed off to be the about right size. Because I've got this really nice battle mat I had designed that has some water, so I could do beach ships. So getting those ships up and painted, working on the Greek infantry, I finally kind of got, I feel like, the motivation going for it. But one thing I knew would be a problem when you have a 3D printer is the printer can just keep running. You can just keep printing. So trying to not get myself too distracted on just kind of random side things. I paint a bit more breadth of stuff than sometimes Kentuckian does, a little bit in the fantasy and sci-fi stuff, as well as historicals. But I've also found that there might be some gamers here who do bolt action. And I've got some armies for the boys to work on. And as I was unpacking all my stuff, I have quite a bit of bolt action that needs to be painted. My World War I stuff still needs work, and my French Indian War stuff still needs work. Like those are two armies that are like somewhere between around 50% complete. So my goal is to primary focus on my Syracuse Greeks, and then just kind of work through the other stuff when I need a break and need to kind of swap, need a palate cleanser, as it was. And now that the hobby room's set up, hopefully I can get some of the guys out here in for some games. There aren't really a lot of conventions and stuff out in this area. We are kind of remote. The local convention center does run some like general gaming conventions and kind of other nerd style conventions. One of the local guys, he's put on games like Frostgrave and stuff before. So I know it's receptive to tabletop gaming, so I'm hoping to put on some games at those when they come about. And then I did volunteer recently to put together a robotics STEM program for our youth center for the military kids when they're out of school. But I don't have a timeline on when that has to be done. That's just kind of on my schedule when I get a lesson plan put together. And, it might be a good avenue once I get established with the youth center. What about some historical wargaming? Bring that in, get young people interested in military history and the great skills of painting and building and putting stuff and researching all that. Hopefully will be forthcoming in the future. But yeah, that's pretty much all I got for my scouting report. Kentuckian, if you don't have any final thoughts before I sign us off?
I have to say this. It came to me as an epiphany as we were talking the two things. Again, if you're in our area or local, I'm in Charlottesville. Wyndehurst will say where he's at. Please reach out to us for games. We just love the community. I can't say enough about the community. So just continue to post on Patrol. I love what people are doing. The Brethren guy that does a lot of the gaming out there, those things are awesome. Those pictures are great to look out. Really love seeing, I think John posted some pictures of his Deutsche Afrika Corps the other day. Like, keep doing that. Man, you don't know how motivated just sharing those images and talking about stuff. And really looking forward to the feedback. I know we're going to share this episode on a lot of the Hail pages and kind of the ancient medieval pages. I would just ask for those players, what do you think you missed? And if you've been gaming longer than us, which I know a lot of ancient gamers have, give us the feedback on what you think you missed, why you do or do not play Hail Caesar, and see if we got some things right, or if you think, hey, you really missed the boat on, this point. I really like this point. And then the last thing I'll say, did not clear this with Wyndehurst, but been a lot of significant events in the United States here as of recently. We talked political assassination and everything else, and free speech, and everything seems under attack right now. And so if you're listening to us from in the States, or you're watching, eating popcorn from Europe or anywhere else on the continent, I would say the one thing, you, regardless of how lightning rod a topic can be, I think discourse is, should always be at the priority. And there'll be a lot that somebody would say to me, especially on how I paint my models or if we're gaming with each other, regardless of politics. And I sometimes see us as a gaming community. I know the vitriol, venom can spew from everything, and we can all feel personally slighted. I try to keep let stuff roll off my back. I just say I hope people do that the same, and I just have to make that comment again because it feels like in the States, everything, and again everywhere, regardless of whatever topic you want to talk about, whether in the Levant, what's going on over there, or in Europe and the UN speeches that just happened, obviously the political assassination. My only comment, I would be remiss if I did not mention. I think me and Wyndehurst do a good job, even when people online are, they foreign to us. And some of the comments that we've talked about with historical wargaming, go back and listen to those episodes about sometimes historical wargaming can seem polarizing. And, I think it's timely to always refresh, people on different sides of the aisle of me, different countries that fly under a different banner, or still people. And, we'll treat them as such and be respectful and treat everybody with dignity and respect, and you'll go pretty far. So same thing, just have to at least say that comment as we're on our way out. We have tried to do this. And when Wyndehurst, I remember when he was asking what our mission statement is, it was to encourage, to bring historical wargaming. And, we do talk about some things, and we've talked about controversy in historical wargaming, but I'd be remiss if I didn't mention it. So I hope that lands well, and I really appreciate all your time. I'd love to hear any comments you have as we're signing off on that. But look forward to you guys engaging with us and giving us your feedback, regardless of this great review on this rule set we both love, and it's near and dear to our heart, but also on everything else from your what's in your kit bag to what's on scouting. So nothing else from me, Wyndehurst. I'll let you give some final thoughts and then sign us off.
Yeah, so Kentuckian brings up a good point. He also likes to remind how much of an advocate I am for how wonderful this community is. Even within this community, we have at times, and the reason we did a whole episode on why historical wargaming can be controversial, because it does lend itself more than other aspects of wargaming to being politicized, because we are talking about real events in history, real times. I was before I went to the UK, I was working on a very large army for showing the Ukraine war. That's an ongoing conflict that people have very strong opinions about. And there is a lot going on in the world right now that is affecting a lot of our brothers and sisters in the wargaming community. And this community is one of the kindest, most supportive communities I've ever seen for any hobby. So please remember that. Please try and keep the historical wargaming and our wargaming stuff separate from politics. But understand that we're all humans who are dealing with stuff that's going on in the world could be affecting the wargamers that you're talking with and chatting with. And, find the right venue to have those conversations and be respectful towards each other, because even just hearing somebody you disagree with, allowing them the opportunity to speak might do wonders for them. And, I've seen people attacked because they post, they're very adamant about their Crusader stuff, or, they're very proud of their, Confederate units or the, SS Panzer Division they painted up. And people get angry at them because they have very strong emotions and feelings generated from that. Please keep that in mind, that ultimately we're here to honor and respect history and connect with it and support each other and have fun playing games. So please keep the discourse open and honest and friendly. And like Kentuckian said, I am here in Rapid City, South Dakota. I know that we've got some people, well, at least one person reached out saying they're in the state, but you want to get games in, please reach out and let me know. We can try and find a place nearby that we can meet up and get some games in. Or if you just want to chat, I'm perfectly happy for you all to reach out to me on social media, talk about anything, wargaming or not wargaming. If you just want someone to talk to, I'm always happy to chat. But like we always say, grab your spear and your shield and your musket and belt fed machine gun and join us on the next On Patrol. Dismissed.